Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching 10th and final part of What If Naruto Was Trained by Ninjas of Another World. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto had a relaxed demeanor as he leaned against the doorframe of the Hokage. His team was saluting her while positioned in front of her desk. He chuckled at the look on his opponent's face and shook his head. Since the attack on the Sound prisoners, 1 month had passed. For the village, everything had been quiet, but not for his team. Since then, he had not witnessed a single night of guard duty and had spent 5 days out of the week away from the village. In all that time, they had not encountered a single client, but they had left a few bodies in their wake, monitored a few people, and occasionally lifted some documents. Their opponents and targets had never even been aware of their presence, and they had not been spotted once. Sasuke actually uncrossed his arms and slightly lowered his jaw, saying, "Huh?" Tsunade gave him a sly grin. She handed him a new vest with a slightly slimmer cut, a few more pockets and hidden compartments. "I said, you've been promoted. Congratulations. You are now a special Junin." The boy accepted it with a look of mild dumbfoundment on his face and nodded. He appeared unsure of himself as he said, "I see. I suppose I should say thank you." Naruto sighed and buried his face in his palm. The woman nodded, taking slight amusement in his response. "That will do." Sakura chirped, "Great job, Sasuke." Ino bounced next to him and said, "Yeah. Awesome." She smiled at him and folded her hands in front of her face, saying, "You know, I didn't do this on a whim. You've shown the maturity needed, you've got a handle on elemental manipulation, and thus far, your service has been above and beyond what was expected of you. I expect you to keep it up." There was some danger to her voice. The boy with the raven hair nodded, his expression hardening. "I won't fail." She gave a nod. "I know. I wouldn't have done this if I expected it." Naruto was as composed as usual. It was a novel concept to him. "That makes sense. I never would have guessed," he said to himself. Tsunade became aware of his quiet. "Something to say, Naruto?" The boy gave her a happy look as he looked up. "I'll worry. He's still rough around the edges and bone-headed. Though, I suppose I could say the same of most of the other special Junin I've met. Your team has impressed me, Uzumaki. I've got a mission for Team Shadow, and I want to speak with you when you get back. Don't send one of the girls with the report this time. I don't mind, but we've got something to discuss." The woman placed a folder on top of her workspace. Taking it up, Sasuke peered inside. It was an image of an elderly man dressed in opulent scarlet robes. At the very least, he was in his late 40s, maybe a little older. "What do we want with him?" The Hokage gave a slight scowl. "He's to be eliminated. You can expect a lot of this kind of assignment in the future. You're a special Junin now, and your specialty is assassination, scouting, and infiltration." The young man gave a nod. "What informant do we have?" The woman leaned back and said, "He's Murano Ibachi, a lord of fire serving under the daimyo. You'll find him in the capital city. He frequents the Sakura Gardens in the early afternoons habitually, spends his evenings in his manor, and most of his days in his office. The office is off limits, you'll plan your strike elsewhere, in his home, or in the park are your best bets." Naruto walked confidently ahead. "Are we making it look accidental, or sending a message?" Tsunade gave that a menacing smile. "The latter." She squinted at the team captain. "There may be a girl with him, about 19. In front of her if possible, we'd like her to see it, but it's not required." "That's all we need then," the Junin answered. His team moved to follow him as he turned away and said, "Unless you have anything else, we'll be on our way." Tsunade questioned, not interested in what he did. Sasuke said, "Does it matter?" Without turning around. "If you want to tell us, I suppose we'll listen, but it doesn't change the mission, does it?" replied Naruto. The Hokage nodded in agreement. "Not really," the man said, robbing the daimyo's daughter while she was paying a visit to his daughter. He'd threatened her, paid for her silence, and almost got away with it. The girl had kept her mouth shut and was not speaking. Regretfully, he had caused her to become pregnant. Understandably incensed, the daimyo had mandated that the child's father be identified via genetic matching. Ibachi was a single brother who had passed away more than a decade ago, and he had no sons. The guilty party was obvious. His daughter had declined to give him his name because she was still afraid of the man. Being strong and well connected, he believed that he was above these kinds of actions, even if they were found out. That was exactly what was being presented. He believed that he was going to marry the girl soon. He could also follow through on his threats. That the daimyo had agreed to his proposal of marriage in order to protect the girl's honor did not appear to have surprised Ibachi. Head cocked, Naruto sauntered out of the office. Ibachi, huh? Sasuke gave him a quick glance. You know him? The blonde gave a shrug. I know of him. Never met him. He's not a minor target and considers himself a rival of the daimyo with good reason. He's been plotting to kill him and take the seat for years. Never had an opportune moment, as the daimyo has been on to him for just as long. He's got a lot of support in the National Council. His own little faction waiting for the tide of power to turn. Sakura scowled in response. You certainly keep your ears to the ground. I'd heard about him, but most of that is news to me. He's supposed to be a perverted jerk, and Tsunade-sensei won't send any kunoichi in any duties relating to him from what I've heard. Ino gave a nod. Yeah. I heard Mitsukashi talking about him. She said she got stuck guarding him once as a diplomatic escort to win back when the third was still in charge. He kept trying to get her into his room while she was supposed to be guarding his door and felt her up every chance he got. The kunoichi with pink hair laughed. I wish we could tell her about this. She'd be jealous. Naruto gave her a scowl in return. You shouldn't take this so lightly. We're going to kill him. The Japanese woman blushed and lowered her head slightly. You're right. Sorry. Head tilted, Ino did. I wonder why now though? I mean, if he's been trying to kill the daimyo for years, why not get rid of him sooner? Sasuke raised his voice. He's useful. Politics, he's a strong member of the National Council, and despite that he's trying to stab him in the back, the daimyo has been able to use him. They're not so dissimilar policy-wise. At that, Naruto gave a nod. He's right. It's not our business why anyway. Our job doesn't concern, why? Sakura appeared irritated. How do you know all that anyway? I have read the paper, Naruto answered. Sasuke gave a tongue. Click. I hate reading the paper. I do it anyway though, it's more useful than I thought. Told you, Naruto answered. You too should start. You'd be surprised how often what's in there relates to what we do. In fact, haven't I told you this before? Both of them became silent and withdrew a little. Sasuke appeared irritated and said, yeah. Shut up. I hate it when you're right about something, you don't let it go. Naruto gave him a sly grin. He was already treating Sasuke harshly from the beginning. Yeah, well you're second in command now. So you can expect me to be a little hard on you. It's my nature. Sakura was a medical student and Ino was just Ino. They left the gates behind and made their way through the forest's shadows toward the capital. The city stretched far into the distance and was teeming with life. Standing on a rooftop with a view of rooftops, homes, shops, and businesses, were the four shinobi. The Fire Country government was housed in a sizable palace. Like structure in the middle of everything. The city, known as Kajishufu, had 5 sizable entrance gates and a wall encircling it. It measured 3 miles in diameter. The daimyo's house was located a short distance away in the opposite direction from Team Shadow, which was close to the main government building. There was a long, expansive garden beneath them. It was full of cherry trees, but the garden was flooded with the characteristic pink. Topped trees because the sakura blossoms were in full bloom. The area was immaculate, featuring small streams crossed by wooden bridges and numerous roving guards to prevent undesirables from entering. Technically open to the public, but with clearly defined rules, it was a hangout for the powerful and wealthy. You would be escorted out pretty quickly if you didn't look like you belong. The people strolling around had high noses and were dressed elegantly. One could mistake this place for paradise. The fair-haired boy scowled and snarled. Damn. Ino sighed once more. Them again? There were 5 ninjas surrounding their target. Everybody was donning a forehead protector featuring an etched cloud. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. Anyone else think it's weird we keep running into them? Sakura grimaced as she peered at the scene through a pair of binoculars. Yeah. We've not left Fire Country for a mission in a while. Everywhere we go we see those jerks. What the hell are they doing here? Naruto placed his foot on the edge of the roof and bent over his knee. Their jobs. They're for hire as much as we are. Sasuke gave himself a crack. So what? What difference does it make? The man crossed a bridge and sauntered through the park, seemingly oblivious to anything around him, while the blonde boy peered down at the scene. They had seen a lot of Kumo lately, so they said, none. We've still got a job to do. Armed to the teeth as usual. With a narrowed gaze, Sasuke surveyed the situation with his Sharingan. How much you want to bet one of them is a chakra sensor? Sakura didn't seem to care. A lot of good it will do them. There's that girl, Ino said. At least I think so. Hokage didn't tell us what this girl is supposed to look like. Naruto noticed that. Her body and face were slim, and she had long, dark hair. Her eyes were downcast, her complexion flawless. The old man put his arm across her shoulders and she stiffened, but she didn't push back. Thought he had never met her before, he knew her. He asked, recognize her? To them. Sasuke grinned. That's the daimyo's daughter, Inamori. Ah, was Naruto's response upon realizing. Thought I'd seen her someplace before. Sakura said, what do we do then? Their leader said, perched on the edge of the roof, observe for the moment. I'm gonna go ask around a bit. Meet me at the south gate this evening. That's correct, Sasuke said, frowning slightly. A few foxes were scuttling around the gardens. Because of Naruto, he had started to notice them. Hey, this place is pretty, Ino remarked. Sakura said, yeah, it is kind of nice, as she kept looking through the binoculars. As the night wore on, their target retreated toward his office, the girl by his side. He was guiding her along, his arm around her waist and his hands squeezing her behind. But the girl didn't seem to notice and kept walking beside him, saying, Gah. That pervert. As she moved a little nearer to Sasuke, Ino remarked, it's kind of romantic up here. He stated, we should be observing the target, skipping her glance. Sakura frowned slightly and said, I dunno. I do kind of see your point, but I'm not so sure plotting to kill someone is very romantic, Ino. The girl gave her a slight frown. Well, not that part. Just the view and the gardens are something, aren't they? I've never been here before, it's bigger than I expected. It's really pretty with the sakura in bloom. What the hell? Sasuke murmured. What is he doing? Sakura looked away from the lenses and said, huh? What do you mean? Naruto, he's walking up to the guy in plain sight. Sakura blinked and opened her eyes wide, using her binoculars to look around. Is he joking? Ino asked, looking shocked. No. He's... well, sort of. That guy's a jerk. He chases us off and calls us rodents when he sees us. Always going on about how the groundskeeper should get rid of us. Yeah. We're Kanadis. We eat rodents. Inamori has been hanging around him lately. She doesn't smile anymore like she used to. She's always been nice to us. If she doesn't finish her lunch, she used to toss it over to us. That jerk won't let her anymore though. Seated before him were 3 foxes, and Naruto questioned, so, he stops there every day? He looked over his shoulder while he was in his fox form. Yes, Highness, he stops and feeds the koi for a few minutes. Unless it's raining or something. One of them replied. Yeah. We hang out around here and wait for people to stop and feed the koi. It gets them close enough that they're easy to catch without getting too wet, the other replied. He's pretty reliable. We can't let him see us though. Don't see him much in the winter, but he'll be out here every day until it starts getting cool in the fall, said one of the others. No, he won't, Naruto answered. Sorry, but you'll have to start relying on someone else for that soon. Thanks, I'll see ya. The animal seemed a little happier at the suggestion being made, saying, sure thing, Highness. Their faces were all sporting rather sinister smiles. Hey, that means Inamori will be free again, exclaimed one of them. Great. She's a lot less stingy. He barely throws enough out to get more than a few of the koi to surface, said one of the others. Leave it now, the humans are departing. We must reach the trash can by the east gate before the groundskeeper does. There's always something tasty to eat there. The third one began to trot away, leading his friends to follow. Once more, Naruto changed forms, his long blonde hair cascading down his back and his chest protruding. Wearing an expensive looking black silk kimono with pink flowers etched into the fabric, he stepped out onto the path with a pleasant smile on his face. She bowed her head and raised her arms, hands in her sleeves, in front of her. She puffed up her chest a little more than before and bounced a little as she walked in a prim and proper way. As per his reputation and form, Ibachi paid attention. He stopped walking, removed his hand from the girl's waist, and stepped in the direction Naruto was going. He had a stern, impassive expression on his face. He looked out over the trees, his back to her. She passed by next to him while the ninjas encircling him kept a close eye on her. As she passed, the man remarked, "This year's cherry blossoms are really beautiful." The blonde paused, then grinned. Yes. It's quite a sight to see. The ninja surrounded Inamori, obscuring her vision, as the man peered over his shoulder at her. The girl kept her head down and stood silently. I've not seen you before. Are you new to the city? With a nod, Naruto maintained her happy expression. It's impressive. Quite something, I must say. The gardens are as impressive as I'd heard. The man turned to face her and said, yes, natural beauty is a rare thing in today's world. His cool gaze lingered on her body rather than her face, and he did not smile. Naruto gave a small laugh. Natural. There's nothing natural about this place. The grass is kept short, the trees are in neat rows, and each flower is carefully selected for its presence and beauty to be on display. Without someone keeping watch over it, it would become wild and overgrown. I prefer that kind of beauty, though I can appreciate this as well. Moving to her side, he bowed and said, I am Murano Ibachi. You speak like a well-cultured flower yourself. Tell me, what brings you to Kajishufu? I'm here to enjoy the culture, she smiled sweetly in response. I know of you, of course, you're on the National Council. Quite an influential man as I understand it. The man arched his chest and attempted to project dignity as he said, ah, beauty as well as intelligence, a rare combination. He was very experienced, and it worked as intended. Naruto looked in the ninja's direction. I was curious what sort of man would have so much protection. Kumo ninja? Impressive. I do hope the daimyo and Reikage are well. The biggest one, a robust man wearing dark glasses and a mask, nodded. Well enough. Who are you? She forced a flush to her cheeks. The blonde thought for a moment before saying, oh, forgive me. How rude of me. I am the ruler of Shadow Realm. She bowed to them and lowered her head, grinning, Yakokyu. Before she could bring it up again, it disappeared. Shadow Realm? Inquired the elderly man with wide eyes. In fact, the girl behind the ninja gasped. Although none of the guards appeared particularly frightened, they were all staring at her. They didn't appear to consider her a threat, even though they were alert. Still, they were keeping a close eye on her. Yes, the blonde answered. He was drawn in by her hammered statement, I haven't seen the capital in many years. It's grown quite a bit, and I can barely recognize it. Her top's slight looseness and plenty of cleavage were no coincidence. I must admit that I'm surprised to find Kumo Ninja in Kajishufu guarding an official. Though, not that much. I attended the Chunin exams not long ago, and they were rather impressive. At that, the man gave a nod. Naruto saw he was trying to make himself look impressive by not smiling and said, yes. They have impressive strength to be sure. It's not as unusual as you think. The daimyo keeps his eyes over our shoulders enough as it is. He tends to find out about things if we use Leaf Ninja. The blonde heard his voice grow wary. She knew he was lying completely. For a high-ranking official to have hired ninjas from abroad to protect him was extremely unusual. It could have meant that he was getting nervous around the daimyo or that he had suspicions about Konoha. Technically, she supposed, they could both add up to the same thing. And he was right about it, not that it really mattered. Well, the streets just aren't as safe as they used to be, I suppose. I was accosted by horrible little street urchins on my way here. I'm glad they have the good sense to keep such filth away from this place. Filthy, disgusting things. The man gave a nod. Yes, there is no need to fear such things here. Inamori, hidden behind the man's guards, scowled at her. There was a faint smile on Ibachi's face. Have you eaten? I was just on my way, and it's been a while since I've had an interesting conversation over a meal. Naruto was well aware that he had already eaten lunch. But he was giving in to her every move. He couldn't claim that the kitsune he lived with had never taught him anything helpful, even though it irritated him a little. They had taught him the exact way to perform his part. She started laughing and making almost offensive remarks about people from lower social classes shortly after. They were enjoying beef sukiyaki while seated around a table that had a pot on the stovetop in the center. At the far end of the table, Inamori sat silently with her head hung. Given that it was after the lunch rush, the business was largely empty. Naruto, also known as Yakokyu, was utilizing her figure to draw him in and engaging him in light political banter that matched his views. She pivoted and scrutinized the table. You are the daimyo's daughter, Inamori? She nodded once, but kept her eyes downcast. She was repulsed by the woman and said, yes. She was fine with Ibachi ignoring her, but she was not fond of the blonde. Yeah. I remember hearing about your engagement. Congrats. She smirked at the girl and turned to face the older man. He became a little nervous. Yes. We are to be married soon. But not yet, no? Inquired the fair-haired woman, whispering in his ear. He gave a small laugh at that. No. Indeed not. The ninja were not eating. Instead, they were gathered around the table. With their arms crossed, they watched the area around the three. There were 4 strong men and 1 kunoichi. There were several skill levels represented: long range weapons user, expert in taijutsu, expert in genjutsu, likely also a chakra sensor, expert in ninjutsu, and the leader was a big, strong man who exuded an air of authority and dominance. A shinobi of Junin level. In their previous missions, they had encountered multiple groups of Kumo ninja, but they had consistently encountered Chunin groups. Yakokyu gave the ninja a look. My, they are impressive. I enjoyed my last visit to Kumogakure. It's quite a beautiful place. Ibachi gave a nod. Yes. I will not speak ill of our own shinobi, but they are more than up to the task. Yes, these are trying times. Sound is making trouble for near everyone I hear. I doubt they are a real threat, but they do make things inconvenient. I hope someone manages to catch the nerve to wipe Rice Country from existence. Why not you? Inamori inquired. You are the ruler of Shadow Realm, are you not? She immediately bowed her head as the man glared at her. The blonde said, would that it were so simple. You are young yet, and I doubt you understand the nature of the political landscape. I've little doubt I could destroy the land or Rice easily, but then I would have to deal with the aftermath. It would be incredibly dull and vultures from every corner of the 5 countries would come to pick the bones clean. Far more trouble than it's worth. Yes. That's a very wise statement, Ibachi answered. She is still a child, but she will learn. It is in her blood after all. Such naivety fades with age and experience. Naruto gave a nod. Yes. It does. Still, I had heard she was more spirited. A woman should not lose such a noble quality. Inamori hung her head once more, wide-eyed as she looked up at her. The blonde, hoping for ramen, took another bite of beef. He had sympathy for the girl. It was more important to keep Ibachi interested than to say something more encouraging. And with that, the meal was finished. The man grinned and got up. Well, why don't we continue this conversation in my office? Naruto smirked as he sat in the hallway of the government offices. He was covered in golden fur, and a kitsune was keeping Ibachi busy in his office. There were muffled moans and groans coming from inside, and he chuckled to himself as he patted his way down the carpeted hallway. His 9 tails wagging behind him as he strolled casually through the rich palace-looking offices. What a waste of money, he muttered as he glanced around. There was a sharp gasp and he froze in place. Inamori then? Good, I was hoping to speak to you. What? The girl was standing behind him frozen in shock. The animal in front of her was huge, and it was talking to her. Naruto tried to put on a cheerful face, but ended up showing his fangs a bit. Hello. Is your father around? I'd like to speak to him as well. What do you want? Ibachi. The animal changed into a blonde woman with a smirk on her face. A very familiar woman. Her eyes grew wide and she staggered back against the wall. Oh, don't worry about him. He's busy with one of my servants right now. He thinks it's me. Who are you? What do you want? Demanded the girl as her eyes grew hard and her tone grew firm. The woman chuckled. I told you already. I'm the ruler of Shadow Realm. We're allies of fire, and I'm very interested in finding out why there are Kumo ninja in the National Council chambers. It's unheard of. She walked up and leaned towards the older girl. I'm sure your father wouldn't be pleased to find out his only daughter is in the care of foreign ninja, especially from a place like Kumogakure. They aren't guarding me, snapped the girl. Naruto cheered up a little more. There's the spirit I heard about. I noticed that, by the way, even more reason to find it strange. Protecting him, yet leaving his fiancée, the daimyo's daughter no less, with no protection? You were singing their praises before. What do you want from me? Inamori had calmed a bit, but still didn't trust her. She kept her cool and seemed calm, despite that she was terrified of the strange creature she'd found herself speaking to. Yakokyu cocked her head in a sweet and friendly-looking gesture. You catch more flies with honey than vinegar, dear. I was buttering him up. What I want from you is the reason he's so nervous that he's hired outside protection. Kumo has had quite a presence lately, and I find it odd. I'm curious as to why that is. The girl balled up her fists. My father isn't here. I can't get near him. I'm not just his betrothed, he's holding me hostage. Naruto narrowed his eyes. I see. If anything happens to him. Those ninja with him have orders to kill me as well, she nodded. She took an uncomfortable step back and put her hand on her belly. It was a slight bulge, she wasn't very far along, but it was beyond the point that clothes would hide it. He said that he knew my father has requested a ninja team to assassinate him. The stranger scowled at that. No one finds it strange that there are Kumo ninja here? The girl looked frustrated. No one will say anything. Only his supporters are in this wing. The others do not know I am here. The shinobi keep me well hidden. They know of the engagement, and the only place I am seen with him is in the garden. Did he say how he found out about this supposed assassination? Asked the blonde. What do you care? Snapped the girl. Tears were starting to fall down her cheeks. She was keeping her voice down. I can't stay here long. If I'm gone for too long, his hired thugs will come for me. The blonde smiled at her. Tell me, do you know where your father is now? She nodded. He is at his home. I cannot run. One of them is a chakra sensor, I would not make it out of the building before they dragged me back. Yakokyu chuckled at that. Well, I think he can owe me a favor then, replied the blonde as her form shifted. Inamori gasped as she found herself looking at her own mirror image. No. You fool. It won't work, a bunshin will never. Naruto shook her head. I'm a kitsune. They won't know the difference, it's not a bunshin. The girl gasped. What? They'll know it's not my chakra. The blonde woman shook her head. You're pregnant. That screws with chakra sensing abilities like you wouldn't believe. Now, I want you to leave and head straight for your father. I'll take care of things here, don't worry. She started walking back and gave her a gentle shove. Where the hell is he? Growled Ino as she balled up her fist and looked severely annoyed. Who the hell knows? It's not like him to be late though, replied Sakura with a small shrug. You don't sound worried, commented Sasuke as he leaned against the wall next to the gate where they were supposed to meet. There was a lot of traffic going in and out, and Konohagakure ninjas standing about was not an unusual sight. The pink-haired girl arched her eyebrow. Neither do you. Ino glared around. He's probably already here laughing at us. That jerk. Sasuke shook his head. Nah. We're on a mission. He's all business. Something has come up. What the hell was he thinking? Snapped Sakura in irritation. The blonde girl hung her head. Man, I knew he was a pervert, but I had no idea it was that bad. I mean, he went out on a date with the guy. And back to his office, muttered Sakura as she looked a bit ill and put her hand on her stomach. Sasuke didn't say anything. No way, he wouldn't, he thought to himself. Would he? Ino glanced over at him. I doubt it's that bad. I mean, we are here to kill him. I don't think he would, even if he was that much of a pervert. Sakura looked up at the sky. It's getting late. We can't hang around here forever without looking suspicious. Ino nodded. You're right. I don't want to have to explain what we're doing here. Sasuke scowled. They couldn't get caught, even though it was ordered by the daimyo. It was still an assassination of a Fire Country official. He looked up at the sky and stood up, shoving his hands into his pockets. Come on. Ino looked at him. Huh? Where are we going? The boy looked over his shoulder at her. To get ready for tomorrow. If he's not here, we've got to go ahead without him. The pink-haired girl nodded. He's right. Maybe he'll get in trouble? Said Ino. It didn't sound like something she thought of as unpleasant. It would serve the jerk right. No. This is our mission, and it's up to him whether or not he helps us. Remember, her teammates sounded a bit annoyed. That is so unfair, grumbled the blonde. Sasuke glanced at them both. It doesn't matter. We've got our orders. Naruto was not in a happy place. Inamori had been allowed out of her cage to use the restroom when he'd run into her. He was currently in a lavish bedroom with the door locked. One of the Kumo ninja had questioned why she had stopped for so long in the hall. She was right about him being a chakra sensor. He'd managed to sneak her out despite the ninja's abilities by claiming she'd bumped into one of the servants who kept the halls clean on the way back. The censor was only looking for a single signature, and his heading back to the room had been enough to keep him from getting too curious. The now dark-haired girl had managed to use Inamori's pregnancy to claim illness had stalled her. She mentioned feeling a bit queasy still, and they shoved her into the room and locked the door. He ended up poking about the room, going through drawers, and being generally nosy. He ended up in there for about an hour. The sky had grown dark outside when the door opened. The largest ninja walked in and crossed his arms. Come, Ibachi wishes to speak with you. The kitsune he'd used to keep him occupied was long since gone. The real him was sitting in the darkest corner of the room looking on as his cage Bunshin followed the man out of the room and into the hall. No one knew he was there, his chakra was hidden, and he narrowed his eyes as he looked out the window. Great. I missed the meeting. Those idiots better take care of this. He briefly considered leaving the room and having a look about, but decided against it. He knew where the Kumo ninja were, and it was easy to keep an eye on them by remaining where he was. Inamori had her head down as she was led into the room. She kept her quiet and reserved mood and kept watch of the others around her by watching their feet. Ah. Inamori, how good to see you. How are you feeling? Said the man in an almost pleasant tone. I am ill, she replied. Now, no need to be so rude. I shall be your husband soon, and once that happens, your father will be able to do little to stop me. The man had a cruel grin on his face. No. I am pregnant, it has made me ill, she replied without looking up at him. The man arched his eyebrow. Speaking so informally? Always before you were, with child. Now, Inamori, come here. He moved up towards the man with a tentative caution. What do you want from me? Ibachi got a cold smirk on his face. I think you know what I want. Why do you always question it so? Were you not satisfied enough by that woman? He asked in a slightly tense voice. Oh, shit, said his mind. Satisfied? My dear, I am never satisfied. Are you jealous? Naruto grunted as he found himself shoved into the desk. The man started pulling at Inamori's top, opening it up and reaching into it with his hands. So lovely. The child has made you grow so. The young dark-haired girl tried to push his hands away. I told you, I am ill. I do not wish. The man's face grew dark and angry. His hand snapped up around her throat. The young girl gasped and choked. "I do not care what you wish. You will satisfy me as my wife, and perform your womanly duties." He shoved her back roughly by the neck and let her go. She rubbed her hand across where he'd grabbed her and struggled to stay on her feet against the side of the desk. "I was about to say, I do not wish to dirty your office if I become ill. I am not well this evening." He scowled at her. "I'm sure." He turned her around and shoved her shoulders onto the desk. "If you mess up my desk, you'll clean it up. If you turn to face me, I'll punish you. I don't want to get any of your puke on my clothes. Now shut up and do as you're told." Naruto glared at the window. The curtains were open and he could see the city. His fist clenched the edge of the desk as he felt him pulling at the girl's skirt. There was a long needle-like spear for notes in front of him. Within easy reach. He wanted very badly to kill him. He felt the man lifting his leg and squeezed his eyes shut. "Damn it," screamed his mind. He had his orders, he couldn't kill him in his office, it was expressly forbidden. He couldn't reveal himself and endanger the mission. He could do nothing, but stay there and take it like a ninja. An hour later, Naruto slipped back into the shadows of the room as the door opened again. A lone slender figure was shoved back inside. She was gasping for breath and wide-eyed. Her clothes were hanging off her loosely as if shoddily put back on. She wiped at her mouth and ran her tongue down the length of her arm as if to get something off of it. The original looked on in confusion. "What the?" His cage Bunshin turned towards him with a rage in her eyes and punched him dead in the face. "Fix yourself up, I'm leaving now." He almost didn't have time to alter his appearance and shift his chakra on as it vanished in a puff of smoke. His mind went horribly numb as the now dark-haired girl slumped down to her knees and gasped for breath. Sweat started pouring down his face as he almost tumbled onto his face, but stopped himself with his extended arm. "What? No. No way." He was absolutely horrified. That son of a... Before the words could leave his mouth, he staggered over to the wastebasket and threw up violently into it. It took a few times to get everything up. When it was over, he was pale and sweating while sprawled over the top of the wastebasket. The stench of his own vomit filled his senses, but he didn't care. He couldn't move, couldn't think, and could barely breathe. He squeezed his eyes shut as he calmed himself down, controlling his breath. He rolled off the top of the trash can and leaned against the wall next to it, putting his hand up against his forehead. "Take it like a ninja." He closed his eyes and felt his limbs relax. He forced his limbs to go limp and looked up at the ceiling. It was the worst thing that had ever happened to him. He staggered to his feet and moved over to sit on the edge of the bed. His long dark hair hanging around his face. How the hell long has this been going on? He'd read about the engagement months ago. The boy closed his eyes as rage boiled within his gut. However bad he just had it, that girl had been suffering like that for months. He flopped down on the mattress, knowing full well he wasn't getting any sleep that night. He was too upset, too angry, and he had to be patient. He turned his head and glanced out the window. You guys had better not screw this up. That man was going to die, one way or the other. It was difficult to keep his temper under control and suppress his chakra, but he barely managed to do it. Naruto scowled as he glared at the ground. He kept his eyes down, not wanting to look anyone in the face. He felt ashamed, horrible, disgusted, weak. It was early afternoon, and he was just looking at the pavement in the gardens, moving through the flowers and green grass. So much color surrounded him, but everything seemed so gray. It had happened twice more. Once after breakfast, and again before they left for lunch. Each time he'd been violated, he'd been tossed back into that room again. The Kumo ninja didn't care, it was just a job to them. He could do nothing but wait. They approached the bridge where the koi swam about the artificial stream that ran through the gardens. He didn't care to look, cared nothing about his surroundings, and just glared down at the ground. His fist balled up, hidden by the long sleeves of the kimono he'd been given to wear for the outing. He presented it as a gift, as if she was his daughter. He actually seemed as if he thought she would be excited and pleased to receive it. The ground under her feet became wood as they strolled out onto the bridge. Ibachi pulled a handful of breadcrumbs from a bag in his pocket as he neared the center of the bridge. Naruto's eyes grew dark and a cold smile formed on his face. He stopped and moved over to the railing, looking down into the water near the edge of the bridge. Itachi stepped onto the very center of the bridge. He was rigid and practiced in his movements, always walking to the middle before turning to the railing and walking over to it to feed the koi. He never even got the chance to turn. There was a metallic sliding sound as the bridge gave a slight vibration. Naruto caught a glimpse of the edge of a blade running across the width of the bridge from underneath from the corner of his eye. Itachi staggered and gasped as the section of bridge he was standing on slammed downward into a steep ramp. He screamed as he half slid and half fell. The screams became more high-pitched for a moment and then started to fade into a sickly-sounding gurgle. Naruto walked over and glared down at the bottom of the ramp. Itachi was impaled on no less than 13 sharpened bamboo spears that were jutting from the water under the bridge. The shocked Kumo ninja could only look on with wide eyes at the resulting mess as the man died before them. Inamori just glared down at him with a malevolent and dark-looking grin as he looked up at her and reached for her with his hand. He looked half horrified and half confused at the expression on her face. The dark-haired girl spoke up without taking her eyes off her rapist's body. "Well, he's dead. Aren't you supposed to kill me now?" The Junin shinobi pulled out a kunai knife and shoved it into her back. The clothes fell to the ground in a heap as the cage bunshin vanished. What? The entire bridge became consumed in a huge explosion. Pieces of stone and splinters of wood rained down all across the garden. A few patrons were knocked about and given minor cuts and bruises by the fallout of the destroyed bridge. The entire underside had been plastered with explosive notes like wallpaper. When it was over, people were lying about on the ground and peering from around nearby cover in shock. There were a few screams of terror and assorted curses muttered. Naruto was standing on the branch of a tree nearby looking on at the carnage. 2 of the Kumo ninja had managed to escape. The Junin and the Kunoichi, the others were mixed in with pieces of the bridge. He had a serious-looking scowl on his face and closed his eyes. Without a word, he turned away and left the scene. In the middle of a rooftop near the north gate, Team Shadow stood around looking a bit worn, but overall pleased. The mission was successful, and they were past the danger of getting caught. Not that there was much to begin with. The daimyo had made sure there were no patrols in the area for that part of town that day. Naruto walked up to the trio looking worn out and tired. He glanced at Sasuke and gave a weak smile. "Hey. Good job, but a little overkill on the explosive notes. How many of those damn things did you bring anyway?" "Not very stealthy." The raven-haired boy crossed his arms and turned his head away. "They didn't see us, did they?" Ino giggled. "We all pooled our explosive notes together. Too bad 2 of them got away." Sakura scowled at him. "Where the hell were you anyway?" The Junin turned his eyes towards her. He didn't look upset with her, but seemed very serious. "I was trying to figure out where the hell all these Kumo ninja we keep running into are coming from. I knew you 3 could handle that on your own." That caught her off guard. "Oh. Did you find anything out?" He looked at the ground and nodded. "Yeah. Don't worry about it. I'm gonna have a talk with the Hokage about it later." Ino narrowed her eyes a little. "Are you all right?" He tried to look cheerful and failed. "I'm fine. Good job, by the way." Sasuke turned away and put his hands into his pockets. "It's not like you to pass on a secondary objective. You replaced that girl?" The boy shrugged. "I needed to get close to him to do some spying. It was more important than a secondary objective." He sat down on a chimney pipe. "Call it taking the time to see underneath the underneath." Sakura frowned at him. "You're acting weirder than normal. Are you sure you're okay?" He nodded. "I'll be fine." He was always a bit standoffish and aloof, but he wasn't looking them in the eyes and seemed to shy away from them a little. Ino pressed a little more. "Are you sure? You look a bit pale, and she's right, you're acting weird." "I'm fine," he snapped. The 2 girls jumped a bit and Sasuke frowned at him. Naruto stood up and turned away. "Sorry. I saw some things I wish I hadn't." He turned his head to look over his shoulder. "You guys go ahead and start back towards the village. I'll catch up. There's something I need to do before I leave." Sakura frowned. "You're supposed to report to the Hokage." We can't do it for you, remember? The Junin nodded. I know. I'll catch up to you before you get there. Don't worry. He jumped off across the rooftops away from them and vanished a short distance away. What's with him all of a sudden? Muttered Sakura. Yeah. I've never seen him like that. I hope he's all right. Ino looked a little worried. Sasuke started walking away. He'll be fine. Come on. There's no point in hanging around here, unless you want to go looking for him? Both girls knew that would be pointless. Sakura took a bit longer to pull her eyes away from where he'd gone. I hope he snaps out of it. I'm a bit worried now. Ino nodded. Yeah. Whatever it was must have been pretty bad. Inamori was sobbing into her pillow. Her pillow, she was safe, at home. Her father had been moved to tears at her return, and embraced her. He could not believe her tale. It was early afternoon the day after her escape thanks to the strange creature she'd met in the halls of the council building. She could barely believe it herself, it was like something out of an ancient legend. It didn't feel that way to her though, the memories were still fresh and painful, the child still within her. It was a mixture of sorrow and relief that she could have never comprehended before that moment when she finally found herself safe at home. That man is dead. The girl gasped as her eyes went wide. She sat up and pulled her pillow in front of herself. What? You? I didn't have anything to do with it. Turns out he was right, your father did have a contract on him. The golden nine-tailed fox was sitting on the balcony of her room. It was looking at her and seemed very serene and peaceful. It padded towards her and shifted forms into the blonde woman she'd met the day before. She had a sadness in her features that was not there before. The woman sat down next to her and put her arm across her shoulders. I'm sorry. I did not give you proper credit for your strength before. The girl sniffled and relaxed, a smile forming despite her tears. I'm so grateful for what you did for me. Any favor you wish, anything I can grant, is yours. The woman didn't look at her and had a haunted look in her eyes. The kitsune in the garden told me you were kind to them. Please, continue to be kind. Inamori hugged her pillow and nodded. Yes. Of course. My father will be glad to express his gratitude. The blonde girl had a wistful smile on her face. We've met before. I will see him again, and let's just say he owes me a favor. Tell him to remember what the Fox King asked of him in Konohagakure. The girl started to get up. I'll get him. The blonde woman shook her head. I am in no mood to speak with a man. I came here to see you. The daimyo's daughter looked confused. Huh? Me? The woman looked at her and smiled. I took your place and remained behind so that he would not know that you had escaped until his assassination was completed. She put her arm around the girl and leaned her head against her shoulder. I know how you suffered in that man's hands. I know what he did to you. The girl gasped and looked at her with wide eyes. What? The blonde gave her a smile. You're much stronger than I thought. Never forget that strength, and don't lose that spirit I saw when I talked to you before we switched. The dark-haired girl looked at her and started bawling, grabbing her around her neck and sobbing into her shoulder. After Inamori calmed down a bit, Yakokyu stood up and caressed her cheek in her hand. I have to go. Goodbye, and don't forget. The girl nodded and settled down into her mattress. Within a few moments, she was fast asleep. Naruto felt incredibly sappy, yet better somehow as well. He was not over what had happened to him. It still turned his stomach and shortened his temper. Still, he was now able to push past it, and seemed to be functioning more normally. He was a ninja, and he'd done his duty. He had made a sacrifice in order for the mission to succeed. The price was less than his life, but still made him feel a bit hollow somehow. As if he'd left a piece of himself back in that building that he could never get back. Even if it was just for that one day, it did make him feel better that it was him rather than her. He'd not done it in vain, and while it still weighed down on him, seeing her safe at home had lifted a great deal from his shoulders. He met up with his team and seemed a little more zoned out than normal, but otherwise fine. Hey. Glad to see you're back to normal at least, commented Sakura. Yeah. What happened anyway? Asked Ino. You had us all weirded out, even Sasuke a little. The boy glanced at her. Sorry. I'm not getting into that. I'm fine, just got a bit weirded out myself, I guess. That guy was nastier than you think. It did bother him a little, but he'd actually enjoyed seeing him die. Sasuke paused as he looked ahead. Well, it looks like we're back. Naruto scowled at him. What the hell were you thinking with all those explosive notes anyway? We were supposed to let her watch, not blow her into tiny bits. You're lucky she wasn't on the bridge. The Uchiha boy stopped. He glanced over his shoulder and frowned. I figured out what happened to you. He shoved his hands into his pockets. I knew she wasn't going to show up. Naruto froze and looked at him. The window to the office had been open. You. Sasuke frowned at him. Yeah. I did. I figured out you replaced her. I saw her slip out of the building. Ino was annoyed at being left out of the loop. What are you talking about? The raven-haired boy didn't look back at her. Mind your own business. Naruto is a better spy than I thought, that's all. The blonde kunoichi conned a bit, but still muttered under her breath. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Their leader nodded. Sasuke wasn't being smug or teasing him. The special Junin started towards the village. Just forget about it. We're home, and we can put this mission to rest and be done with it. Naruto turned his eyes away and nodded. Yeah. He wasn't sure just how much Sasuke had seen, but he caught the hint that he knew about what had happened in the office that night. Sakura gave a sigh. We're home. She stretched her arms and walked through the gates of Konohagakure. Their leader looked around. It felt good to be back again. Naruto stood in the Hokage's office in a relaxed pose. Everything went well, had to scrap the secondary objective. Didn't work out. She nodded. I know. I've heard a rather strange story from the daimyo. I also know what he was doing to her. The boy looked uncomfortable. Yeah. You did well. You'd be surprised how many of us have made that kind of sacrifice in the past, she said as she eyed him. Yes. I know what likely happened while you were covering for her while she escaped. I applaud your initiative and your understanding of what was most important. She leaned forward. No, she didn't tell on you. I know enough about what was happening to figure it out on my own. Well, aside from blowing up half the gardens, it went pretty smoothly. He stiffened up a little. Sasuke handled it very well. She nodded. Yes. He did. We have a leak, said Naruto. Tsunade nodded. I know. Have there been others? Asked the boy. We keep running into Kumogakure ninja on our missions. They seem to know we're coming. It hasn't been a problem, but... Tsunade shook her head. No, it's just your team. The blonde boy looked confused. Huh? The woman smiled at him. Well, I'm the leak. Naruto was wide-eyed. What? Actually, technically, it would be me. The boy whirled around and found himself staring at a familiar set of white eyes. Hiyashi was standing in the doorway with his arms crossed and a serious expression on his face. Kumogakure has been sniffing around you. They're trying to capture or kill you and your team, replied Tsunade. In fact, we have a spy in our midst. We've been feeding him information, some of it had to be reliable. Your team handled it as expected. The boy's face fell a little. Okay. So we've made them look bad. Now what? Hiyashi walked up next to him. I came to the Hokage when I discovered Kumo's ambassador was working as a spy. It's no real surprise, that's usually how it works anyway. Especially regarding Kumogakure. The man glanced down at him. We're aware of him, and he's under control. So, we'll likely just leave him be aside from keeping a close eye on him in the future. Tsunade looked up at him. I've also noticed a few of your little side projects. Like helping T hunt down those pirate bases. You provided information that pinpointed their location and they were all but wiped out. Naruto shrugged. Yeah. So? They were screwing with our shipping routes too. It's not like I attacked them for them or gave up Konohagakure secrets. It worked out for everyone. The woman smiled and leaned forward a little more. I also know you're bankrolling that little coup that we've been contracted to help out with in Whirlpool. She moved back again. I approved that, by the way. I'll be sending a couple of teams out in a week or so to handle it. Still, I think you had your own reasons for that. Naruto shrank back a little more. She's family. I only gave her a loan and offered some advice. Hiyashi shook his head. You miss the point. We are aware that you hold Shadow Realm's interests above Konoha's. Like how you used your other face to leverage a favor out of Fire Country's daimyo for Shadow Realm. You could have just as easily done it on behalf of Konoha, but you did not. He slumped his shoulders. Well, I am king after all. I can't just ignore them. Tsunade nodded. Yes. That's exactly why I'm taking you off Team Shadow. The boy looked at her with wide eyes. Huh? Sasuke will lead it, it's time to pull you back, said the Hokage. She didn't seem angry or upset. Naruto seemed to consider that. What about Sound? What about them? Asked Tsunade. I'm directly involved. Replied the boy in an equally calm tone. The Hokage nodded. Konoha has handled its affairs in the past. This will be no different. Naruto was frustrated, but didn't show it. I see. Leaf and Shadow are allies in this. I don't want to get cut out of it. The woman smirked at him in a calculating way. I know. I've already been taking more risks with you than I should. I considered it necessary for your growth as a shinobi, and you've proven yourself more than capable. You should have expected this, you're too important to risk. I can't put you in harm's way so carelessly. I believe that you've learned from your experience, but I cannot risk you further. If something were to happen to you, our relationship with Shadow would suffer. You know that. That caught the blonde boy off guard. I think I get it. Tsunade didn't trust him, he didn't think she thought he'd stab her in the back, but his outside deals for Shadow had come back to bite him. Not that he regretted any of them. He was also an important dignitary, and he doubted the Kitsune would care enough to keep supporting Konohagakure and Fire Country without him. The woman sat back in her chair. That's not the only reason. I'm also aware that you're trying to provoke a war with Sound. Consider this my way of slowing your efforts. We'll deal with them, but it's too soon, and that can't be rushed. I understand your position, but I've got my own people to look after as well. You won't be completely cut out. I'm just using you as an independent operative for a time, aside from your other duties. You're fortunate. In the same position, another ninja would have been expelled. Double dealing isn't something we can ignore. Hiyashi looked down at the young Junin. I suppose you wouldn't be doing it if you weren't the ruler of your own people now. Still, a leaf ninja must be loyal to Konohagakure and Fire Country above all else. You are not in a position where that is possible. Well, she did encourage it a bit, replied Naruto as he jerked his thumb at Tsunade. The Hokage smirked at that. I honestly didn't expect you to take it to heart quite so much. I can't really blame you. We don't want to make an enemy of Shadow, but I doubt you'll take this that way. He nodded. I have no intention of fighting Leaf. I'd leave first. Well, you're still wearing our symbol. You're one of my Junin as far as I'm concerned still, and this is the start of your next assignment, replied Tsunade. She slid a folder across her desk and tapped it with her finger. That confused him even more. He picked it up and opened it, looking carefully at the contents. Oh. You have got to be kidding. I'm afraid not, said Tsunade. Naruto looked up at Hiyashi. You're okay with this? I mean. The man gave a small sigh and nodded. I have learned from past mistakes. I am no fool. I have realized that it is time to accept what I cannot change. The Hyuga must adapt, and I must work for the best interests of my clan. It is sooner than I expected, but I requested it personally. I've no doubt she can handle it. I've seen to it personally. He gave a somewhat forced smile. I think you should be able to figure out my reasoning considering our past dealings. Ah man, grumbled Naruto as he hung his head. Are you sure? He looked at Tsunade. I mean, I like Sasuke, he's got the potential to be a great ninja, but... But? Asked Tsunade. I dunno. I mean, you put him in charge, and I'd worry he'll go charging off after Itachi the first chance he gets. I mean, I seriously think he needs supervision for now. It's not that I don't trust him, well, it is actually. I know what to expect from him. Once Itachi is taken care of, he'll be a lot more trustworthy, I think. Until he is, he's going to be an obsessive butthole about it. Naruto looked completely serious. The Hokage chuckled at that. You're the one who's not trustworthy. You're working for your own ends. I understand, really. You've got outside responsibilities. You're not losing any rank, but you've got your fingers in too many pies for the sort of work Team Shadow is doing. He looked annoyed at that. Yeah. Well, I've not failed a mission yet either. Tsunade nodded. Yes. I suspect that if I leave you to your own devices, you'll keep doing what you did this time. Leave the team to deal with the mission, while you go off to work your own angle. It helped Fire Country this time, but I suspect you'll be trying to pull in something that works for Shadow Realm regularly as well. She leaned forward and smirked. I don't trust you to pick Konohagakure if there's a conflict of interests. Naruto scowled at that. She totally had him pegged. Damn it. He took the folder and turned away. Good luck with your new assignment, said Tsunade cheerfully. Hiyashi watched him go. Neji as well. Really now? That's interesting, said Tsunade. I knew about his little friend, but your nephew as well? The man nodded. I'm certain. He is driven by his rivalry with Uzumaki. I suspect he will challenge him soon. Neji was covered in sweat and dirt. He was flowing through Akata smoothly and quickly, moving his arms and spinning around in quick knife-handed blows and jabs with his fingers. Tenten watched on a nearby tree stump in fascination. Is it harder that way? Huh? Asked the boy as he ended his kata and turned his head towards her. His eyes were covered by a strip of cloth. Rock Lee smiled and put his thumb up, allowing his teeth to sparkle as he smiled. Yes. I am pleased to see my teammate broadening horizons in the pursuit of self-improvement. Whatever, grumbled the Hyuga boy as he worked on tightening the wrappings on his hands. Well, you can see anyway, right? I mean, is it something to train the Byakugan or something? Asked the girl as she hopped off the tree stump and smiled at him. She waved her hand in front of his face. No. I am blind, he replied as he grabbed her hand and shoved it down. Stop that. She narrowed her eyes at him. Then how did you know I was doing that? Air pressure, sound, smell. Replied the boy as he pulled the blindfold off his eyes. Tenten scowled at him. Smell? I do not stink. I'm learning to recognize things most people ignore because they rely on their eyes, he replied simply as he ignored her irritation. You don't have to stink to have a scent. Rock Lee furrowed his mighty eyebrows. I see. Perhaps I could benefit from such training as well? Neji just shrugged. Maybe. Smell? What are you thinking of joining the Inuzuka clan or something? Tenten was confused. What's wrong with using your eyes anyway? The boy glanced at her. Nothing, except against an opponent who can fool them. Lee nodded. I see the wisdom in this. I too shall partake in such training. It sends shivers down my spine to think I have been exposed to such a difficult and insurmountable task. I shall train my hardest, and through hard work in the spirit of youth I shall overcome this obstacle and forge a new path. Tenten rolled her eyes. Fine. Boys are so weird. Neji looked at the blindfold in his hand and gripped it in his fist. I'm finished for today. See you later. Lee was overcome with Charjin. Yes, and yet I have only begun. He raised his fist into the air and rushed off to find himself a blindfold of his own. He was very excited just thinking about the endless hours of training and hardship it would supply. Konohamaru had his feet up on top of a desk and a grin on his face. Man. This is great. What's so great about it? Scowled the girl sitting beside him. She was about a year older and glared at the other two in the room with her. I'm stuck with you and that kid over there. She had shoulder-length brown hair and a grumpy look about her. The biggest slacker at the academy, and some kid. She was watching the door to the room intently and waiting. She had little in the way of a figure and was very slim. A young quiet girl was sitting a few rows down from them with her nose in a book. She hadn't said anything, and hadn't bothered to look at either one of them. What? Don't be like that, Midori. You've got no idea how lucky you are, said Konohamaru as he lifted his nose up. Any minute now we're going to. Going to what? Ah! Screamed the brunette girl as she jumped from her seat. The girl at the front of the class gave a small jolt as well. She almost turned to look back at them, but kept her nose in her book. Konohamaru looked up and found Naruto sitting on top of the desk behind him. "Hey. Bro. What's up?" He grinned at him and put his arms behind his head. "Come by to visit or something?" "What the hell?" cried the irritable girl as she grabbed her chest and started panting. The blonde ninja in a cloth face mask glanced over at her. "Excitable, huh?" The black-haired boy nodded. "Yeah. Kind of. She's always so stressed out and kind of a bitch." The girl was the oldest in the room at about 13. "When? How? What?" she muttered as she looked about. There were no windows and one door. She rushed over and opened the door. "There's no." A cloud of dust formed around her head as the dirty chalkboard eraser landed on her skull. She blinked and got bloodshot eyes as she fumed. "How the hell did you get in here?" She whirled around and pointed at the blonde boy. He didn't look more than 2 years older than her. Naruto seemed pleased. "I'm very sneaky." "What brings you, bro?" "I can't really hang out today." "We're waiting on." "What the hell are you doing here?" snapped the irritable girl. "You're not a student, so you shouldn't be here. It's against the rules. You're going to be in big trouble if you're still here when our sensei shows up." Naruto scratched his cheek with his finger. "Iruka went home for the day. There's no chance of that." He looked at Konohamaru. "Is she always like this?" The boy nodded. "Yeah. Pretty much. I haven't known her that long though. I got moved up a couple of classes a few months ago." Naruto nodded. "Oh. Big on rules and such?" "Yeah. She's got a big mouth too." Konohamaru seemed very relaxed and at ease. "Maybe we can hang out tomorrow, bro? I'll tell you about how it went without that noisy chick around." "Noisy chick? You brat," snarled the girl as she jabbed her finger at him. She jumped at his desk and the boy hopped out of the way, bouncing over several rows and out of reach. The girl glared at him and jabbed her finger. "Just you wait. One of these days I'm going to catch you, and then you'll regret it." The smallest girl in the room ignored everything in favor of reading her textbook. She had long dark hair, and that was all either of the other two kids knew of her. Naruto seemed to cheer up. "Well, we should get going." "What do you mean? We're supposed to wait here," snapped the loud girl as she glared at him. "We were told to wait right here until sensei shows up." "Yeah, bro. We can't leave." Konohamaru shrugged. "Kind of a pain, I guess. I haven't seen you in a while and all." Naruto scratched the back of his head. "It's not, bro, anymore. It's sensei. I'm here to pick you three brats up." The older girl's face dropped. "Huh? I'm Uzumaki Naruto, your new Junin instructor." The young girl at the front of the room looked just as surprised as the other two. Her head snapped up, revealing 2 white eyes. "Hey, cool bro sensei," Konohamaru looked pleased. "I thought you were an ANBU or something though?" Naruto shrugged. "Yeah. I sorta got transferred to instructor for a bit." Midori's jaw dropped. "That guy is an ANBU? No way. He can't be much older than me." She pointed her finger at him. "This isn't funny." Konohamaru chuckled. "You'd better not make bro sensei mad. He's pretty sadistic." The young girl stood up and bowed. "It's nice to meet you, sensei." Naruto smiled at her. "No need to be quite so formal." The angry, excitable girl balled up her fists. "Look, you overachieving dipshit. This isn't funny. You can't just drag your friends in here to prank us like this. It's against the rules." Naruto rolled his eyes. "He's not kidding. Now come on. You've all got a test to take." "Test?" said the 3 of them in unison. Naruto nodded. "That's right. Out of the 36 applicants, only 9 are chosen as genin. It's an incredibly difficult exam with a 66% failure rate." He turned towards the door. "Daylight's burning, time to go. Meet me on the balcony outside and we'll discuss the particulars." Naruto smiled. "Well, tell me a little about yourselves, likes, dislikes, dreams, the usual crap." His smile was a bit forced, as he was not really into his new duty. Konohamaru he was fine with, the Hyuga girl was quiet and seemed easygoing. The loud brat was not amusing him. After finally getting Ino to shut the hell up, he had to start from scratch. They also weren't training as Anbu, so he had a lot more limitations on what he could do to force her to shut the hell up. I'm Sarutobi Konohamaru. I like training and stuff, and I'm gonna be Hokage. The boy seemed quite pleased with himself and puffed out his chest. The irritable girl looked a bit miffed and crossed her arms. Azawa Midori, and I don't like this one bit. What kind of genin team is this anyway? What is she, 9? She jerked her thumb towards the boy. And this idiot is a lazy overachieving dork. Naruto nodded reflexively. She appeared to have the worst parts of Sakura and Ino's personalities all in one horrible flat-chested brat. The youngest girl stood up. I am Hyuga Hanabi. She sat back down. Naruto nodded. Good, good. That's a start. Well, we'll meet here tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's going to be pretty difficult, and you might get sick, so don't eat anything before. He turned and walked away, waving over his shoulder at them. See you then. Midori scowled at that. That jerk. He made us tell us all that stuff about ourselves, but then didn't tell us anything about him. Konohamaru shrugged at her. Bro-sensei is just like that. You get used to it. Sasuke sat and smirked as he looked at the pair working in front of him. Kidomaru and Tayuya were digging up potatoes in a field. They were both rather relaxed and went about their work enjoying the fresh air. Neither one had been outside much in the past month. What the hell are you staring at? Growled Tayuya as she glanced over at him. The boy in the tiger mask was leaning against a nearby fence post. There were several other Anbu around the field keeping an eye on them. The Konoha ninja shrugged. It's my job today. You're lucky I volunteered for it, or you'd be sitting in that room staring at the wall still. The other guards were Chunin, and at least one Junin had to be present. Get used to it, you foul-mouthed brat. Fuck you. She snapped. Calm down and shut up, would you? I'm sick of that cell. Kidomaru wiped his forehead. I feel like a damn genin, she grumbled irritably. Yeah. Me too, but that's a lot better than feeling like a prisoner. I'll have enough of that dungeon crawling later. He scowled at her a little, but it wasn't very harsh. You should be used to it, you basement-dwelling dork, she grumbled. Quit looking at my ass, you damn fucking pervert. She shot back at Sasuke. I hate this place. Kidomaru nodded. Yeah. Well, they can't hold us forever. The redhead narrowed her eyes at him. What? Do you think they're just going to let us go? When they're finished with us, we'll be executed, dumbass. She hung her head. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sick of this fucking humiliation. Her fellow prisoner looked about the field. Well, unless you can use your powers, there's nothing we can do but enjoy the fact they let us out for a bit. Mine are sealed, or I'd have already tried. Sasuke was supposed to tell them to shut up, but reading their lips was enough to keep him occupied. Hey. You too. They both looked at him. I don't mind you talking, but change the subject. You'll make me nervous, and I'll have to throw you back in your cells if you do. The pair looked annoyed with him, but went quiet and started working again. A short time later, they were back in their cells once again. The field had been finished, and while a little tiring, they both found it relaxing. They were right next to each other, in holding cells a floor above the interrogation area. The wall between them was thick concrete, but instead of a sealed-up door, there were bars, which meant they could speak and keep each other company. Not that they enjoyed that much. Why did the bitch have to survive with me? Kidomaru glared over at her. He'd never enjoyed talking with Tayuya much. Though, he didn't dislike her near as much as he used to. She had stood by him and saved his life. He owed her, and didn't complain or taunt her as much as he used to. She was sitting against the wall muttering curses just loud enough for him to hear her. Their guard had annoyed her a great deal by watching them so closely. Not that she had tried to escape. As if summoned, a familiar boy walked up to the bars. He had a smirk on his face and opened her cell door. Hey. Get up. She scowled and glared at him. Sasuke wasn't wearing his mask. Without a word, she stood up and put her hands forward, expecting to be chained. The boy shoved her hands down. We're not going that far. He stepped aside and she walked out of the cell. What the fuck do you want? Me? He indicated the door to Kitamaru's cell. You've got a visitor that wants to speak to you both. So I'm putting you in the same place. Just get in there and shut up, would you? She did so and he closed the door on her. Kitamaru frowned at it. Huh? What are they putting you in here for? The redhead narrowed her eyes at him. Don't sound so excited. He frowned at that. I'm nervous. It's bad enough just being next to you. She shrugged. That guy said we had a visitor. You do, replied a vaguely familiar voice. Hello, to Yuya, Kitamaru. Dosu, said the male prisoner. Fucking traitorous trash, growled Tayuya. What the hell do you want? The pair glared at the figure on the other side of the bars. His face was bandaged up, and his arms had his gauntlets on them again. To discuss what's going to happen to you. Sasuke was behind him looking relaxed and less than interested. What do you mean? We'll be executed, of course. The redhead turned her eyes away. We're not going to turn traitor like you. What? You think they're just going to let you go back? Even if you escape, they'll kill you if you return. Just like they did to my team. He shook his head. No. I didn't betray anyone. I was betrayed by Orochimaru, and so were you. I heard about what happened with Kimimaro. He didn't come here to rescue you too. Kitamaru hung his head. Yeah. Well, that's part of being a ninja. We failed, and I'm not so sure I'm glad I survived. Just wish the bastard had been quicker about it. Dosu nodded. I'd have died for sound, but what Orochimaru did was unforgivable. He murdered my team to perform a fucking jutsu. Sacrificed them for a goddamn technique in a failed attempt to assassinate the third Hokage. I hate him. Tayuya spit between the bars. I fucking hate you. You betrayed Sound, you trash. Dosu shifted out of the way. He's going to get Sound destroyed, and Rice with it. Konohagakure is far stronger, and the 5 countries are starting to see things their way. It's just a matter of time. If we don't get rid of him, Sound and Rice will go down with him. Konohagakure would rather just get rid of him if they can. They've no interest in conquering Rice or destroying it if they don't need to. Kitamaru chuckled. We? So, you're one of them now, are you? Leaf trash? Dosu nodded. That's right. I am. What does it matter? Sound won't have me any more than they'd have you. There's nothing you can do, you're exiles. You're not Sound Ninja anymore, and they don't want you back. You're nothing but missing Nin. Tayuya ignored him and nodded at Sasuke. What? This trash is singing your praises, Leaf Trash. You're not going to reward him? Yeah. Give the dog a biscuit, agreed Kitamaru. Sasuke shrugged. You two remind me of how I used to be. I hated everything, still don't like much. Then I figured out that it's best to not waste time hating more than the one who made me suffer. So now, I just hate him. Tayuya pushed her cheeks against the bars with a mad-eyed glare. Did Orochimaru make you suffer? The raven-haired boy smirked. No. I'm not talking about him. I could give a shit about your boss. Dosu nodded. He's right. Don't think I haven't heard about you screaming curses at Sound down here. Leaf has you in that cell because you attacked them. We've talked about that before. Stop wasting time hating them. Kitamaru hung his head. What does it matter? We'll be killed regardless. Dosu crossed his arms. No, you idiots. This isn't Sound in case you've noticed. As long as you behave, they won't kill you. In fact, that's part of the reason I'm here. The pair in the cell looked up at him in half-disgusted, half-confused shock. It's going to be a while. You're not to be trusted, you'll always be under guard, and you won't be allowed to be ninja anymore. No weapons, your chakra will be sealed, and you'll have limited freedom, but... You're right that we can't keep you here forever. He raised his arm and pulled his sleeve down past his elbow. As long as this war with Sound is going on, I'm not much better off. There was a tattoo on his elbow. This is a tracking seal. It lets them know where I am at all times. I was allowed to keep my weapons and I can work as a genin because I defected and provided information. There's nothing you two know we don't already, and you were captured as prisoners of war. What are you saying? Snapped Kitamaru. Call it work release, replied Dosu. It's a few weeks away, so I won't get into the details. You won't be free, and you'll be under guard. You'll be given a job and a place to stay, and you won't be allowed anywhere else. You go to work, and then you go home. So I can expect to have this asshole glaring at my butt cheeks for the rest of my fucking life then? Tayuya nodded at Sasuke. No thanks. I'd rather stay in here and rot. The Anbu chuckled. No. The police force will be handling that. I'm an Anbu, and keeping track of prisoners isn't my job. I'm just here for today because Ibiki asked me to look after you so you could get out of the cells for a bit. Dosu nodded. You're lucky. The Anbu put in a good word for you. The fact that you helped get rid of Kimimaro is the only reason they're doing this. Normally, they'd just send you to Kajishufu to spend the rest of your life in prison there, if you weren't executed, that is. Kitamaru hung his head. Yeah. Lucky us. Tayuya didn't look pleased and turned away from the bars. Whatever. Don't expect us to be grateful. Sasuke nodded. Yeah. Well, see you around then. Learn to keep your mouth under control and keep your head down, and you might live through the war. If you handle it right, you can probably leave and do what you want when it's over. Dosu turned away. I'll be in touch. You don't have to pretend to like me, but it will go smoother if you can pretend to act civilized. The Anbu opened the cell door and waved his hand at her. Come on, back to your cell. She shuffled out and jerked her shoulder away from his hand as he ushered her along. A moment later, the cell was closed and he walked out with Dosu. The former sound glanced at him. It was kind of you to volunteer to keep an eye on them and get them out for a bit. The Anbu shrugged and looked indifferent. Guess I felt a little sorry for them, and she did help us out that night, even if it was for her own reasons. She looked out for her companion too, that counts for something around here. Dosu nodded. Yeah. This place is different than I'd heard. We were enemies, and I suppose they exaggerated things to make us hate fire and leaf more. Sasuke smirked at that. We're not all that good either. The genin nodded. I know. Leaf ninja have it better than you think. Maybe they'll see it, maybe not. It wouldn't surprise me if they tried to escape and ended up getting sent to prison in Kajishufu anyway. Still, I understand them, and I have to try. The Anbu turned away, moving in a different direction as they exited the holding area. Yeah. Well, I'll see you around. I've got a meeting to go to. Within 10 minutes he was in the fox den. He slumped down in a chair in front of Naruto's desk. Sakura and Ino were already there and standing around the room in relaxed poses along the walls. Hey. What's up? I heard you wanted to talk to us. Naruto had his feet on his desk and looked annoyed. Yeah. I did. What's this about? Asked Sakura. Yeah. Is there another mission? Ino leaned forward and grinned. Probably, but I won't be along, commented Naruto as he put his hands behind his head. Everyone looked confused for a moment. He looked at Sasuke. I'm no longer a member of Team Shadow. What? Said Sakura in confusion. Naruto shrugged. I got fired, relieved of duty, whatever you want to call it. I'm no longer on your team. They all gave him blank stares. Even Sasuke looked dumbfounded. WH. What are you talking about? Muttered Ino finally. Naruto looked at the ceiling. Starting tomorrow, I've got a genin team. I'll give them the test, of course, but they'll be passing it regardless. My team was hand-selected for me by the Hokage, and I can't get out of it. He frowned a little and tossed a pencil into the ceiling boards. It stuck in place alongside about 15 others. Ino cocked her head. They're making you an instructor? Sakura seemed to think on that. Those poor genin. Sasuke nodded. I suppose we'll be getting a replacement then? Naruto nodded. Probably. Make sure and get them up to speed. I doubt you'll be getting stuck with a genin. You're Anbu, so they'll probably stick you with a spare. It was a common term used when ninja were left without a team for various reasons. Anything from having team members die, to retired ninja leaving vacancies, or even reassignments leaving teams with too few members to operate normally. The remaining members were often either put together or transferred to new teams with openings. No idea who it will be. Sakura frowned and hung her head. So, you're not on our team anymore then? Ino looked pretty much the same. Wow. I mean, it happens to every team sooner or later, but still. We'll miss you, I guess. It was going so well and I didn't expect it so soon. Naruto seemed surprised. Huh? I'm not dead or anything. Relax. I'll be seeing you around and all. I'm still an ANBU, I'm still running the den, and you guys get everything but drinks free for life. You can handle missions without me. I'm to understand I'll be taking solo missions on occasion while I've got my genin team. The girls looked to be on the verge of tears, but kept themselves under control. They didn't seem too upset, but it was an emotional moment for them. Sasuke sat back in his chair. What happened anyway? I mean, there must have been a reason. The blonde kicked his feet off his desk and folded his hands on top of it with a sigh. Hokage wants me to train more ninja like us. Those two lazy jerks that train me won't do it, so now I'm stuck being an instructor. That's remarkably similar to what she said, replied a familiar voice from behind them. Sakura and Sasuke both turned back quickly. Ino looked as well, but arched her eyebrow. Kakashi-sensei, said the pink-haired girl as she smiled at him. The gray-haired man seemed cheerful. Hello. I was just looking for you. Naruto stood up. Hey. What's up? Kakashi looked over at him. I'm your replacement. The Hokage decided to take your advice. I'll be taking over your team. The blonde smirked and nodded. I see. He flopped down in his chair and kicked his feet up. How did they drag you back into the Anbu? His former instructor chuckled. Who said I left? You'll be back most likely. Junin are independent operatives for the most part. We get rotated into teams for a time as well on occasion. Sakura smiled at him. So we'll be working with you again? He nodded. That's right. Don't get too nostalgic. I'm not an instructor anymore. You should stop calling me sensei. We're all Anbu now, though do I still outrank you? Ino seemed to think about it. That's right. You were their Junin instructor when we were all genin, weren't you? The man nodded. Yes. We all know each other pretty well. I'm sure we'll get along all right. Sasuke seemed very relaxed. Hey. I guess I'm not in charge then. Kakashi glanced down at him. Afraid not. Sorry. The boy arched his eyebrow. Are you kidding? That's great. I'd never be able to dodge these two if I was the leader. Ino smiled at him. Well, now you only have to dodge Sakura, because Naruto won't be around so much. Actually, I think he was talking about you and Naruto, commented Sakura. Naruto smiled at Kakashi. Get used to it. The man dropped his head a little. I see. Sasuke stood up. I'm getting kind of used to tuning it out. Sakura and Ino had their foreheads touching as they glared at each other. I'm pretty sure he was talking about you. No way. He definitely meant you. Naruto felt better seeing it. Hey. I don't have to put up with it anymore either way. The two girls glared at him for a moment, but seemed to relax in unison. Ino seemed unsure of what to say. I guess this is goodbye then. Sakura puffed her chest out a bit. You're a total jerk and a sadistic pervert. But it was an honor serving with you anyway. She bowed to him. Sasuke smirked at that. Someday, I'm gonna kick your ass. You know that, right? Naruto shrugged. You'll certainly try. Don't be strangers. It's not like I've been banished or killed. Kakashi nodded. I'll look out for them. The blonde boy nodded. They'll look out for you too. The group left his office and he stayed behind his desk. Tomorrow was a new day, and he had to get up early so he could start tormenting those children. Naruto yawned as he crawled out of bed. Kira, Masara, and Kurama were curled up on the mattress in the nude. He had on a pair of shorts and scratched his head as he blinked some of the sleep out of his eyes. It was early, the sky outside was orange as the sun rose. Coffee, he grumbled as he worked his toes into the carpet and shuffled over to the kitchen. He glanced over his shoulder at the kitsune and rubbed at his neck. He was still getting used to the new bed. He'd replaced his old single mattress with a king-sized bed. They would all fit into it with room to spare, and they'd made full use of it. He turned back to what he was doing and started the coffee maker before going over to the fridge to start breakfast. Kitsuma was starting to grunt and whimper a little. He wasn't awake yet, but his father could tell he would be soon. Kira was the first to wake up and put her feet over the edge of the bed. She gave him a sleepy smile as her clothes appeared on her body. "Good morning, Highness." The blonde nodded and rubbed at his eyes while yawning. "Yeah. It is, sort of." The violet-haired Kitsune was usually the first of the trio to rise in the mornings. He was usually up a bit before her. She cocked her head and pouted a little. "Huh? What do you mean?" "I've got to start with that genin team today," he replied simply. She seemed pleased. "I'm sure you'll get into it once you get started." He gave a half-hearted smile at that. "Probably. It's still a little annoying though." It was about 8:30 in the morning. Naruto was outside walking through the streets of the village. He was making his way towards the practice field where he was supposed to meet his genin team at 9. He had no intention of making it on time, and was planning on meeting them at about 10. It would give them time to get frustrated and think about how they'd missed a meal. "Naruto," called a familiar voice. He turned and smiled as he noticed Iruka approaching. Classes were over until the end of the summer break. "Iruka, it's been a while." "Yes, it has." His former instructor looked very pleased to see him. "I've heard, of course. You're instructing one of the genin teams." The blonde nodded. "Yes. I'll be meeting with them later." Iruka smirked at him. "Don't be too hard on them." Naruto chuckled at that. "Well, I might have to muzzle one of them, but I think they'll do all right." The man nodded. "Midori is a bit spirited. She's a good kid though. She was ranked 3rd in the class. She's got a good handle on taijutsu and her genjutsu skill isn't bad either. She could use a bit of work in ninjutsu." He gave his former student a knowing smile. "I suspect you already know about Konohamaru. Ebisu is a good tutor, but I know you've been working with him. He was moved up 2 grades, and I have trouble telling if he's in class sometimes. I may not have noticed it with you, but now that I know what to look for, it's kind of hard to miss." The Junin shrugged. "Yeah. I started working with him back when we met after my exams. I didn't expect to end up his Junin instructor though. He used to think of us as rivals." The academy teacher cocked his eyebrow a little. "He doesn't anymore?" Naruto thought about it. "I'm not sure. I kind of doubt it. I'm never going to be Hokage. I sort of grew out of that, I guess." That caught his former teacher off guard. "Well, you can still dream, right?" The boy smiled at him. "I've found other dreams." Though, that Hyuga girl was a bit of a surprise. Iruka seemed to agree. "Yeah. She passed the exams. She was homeschooled though, so I don't know much about her. As I understand it, she's to be Hiyoshi's heir. He trained her personally. She was able to make a bunshin easily, and her written exams scores were above average. Quite impressive for her age." Naruto nodded and looked thoughtful. "I see. She seems confident, very formal though. Not that it's a bad thing, but she does seem a bit young." The teacher shrugged at that. "It's not the first time someone as young as her has become a genin." The blonde seemed to consider that. "I guess so. Still, that Midori girl is going to be a bit of a pain. I have to train her to shut up. I'm more concerned with her than either of the other two." Iruka chuckled at that. "Well, don't forget they're just genin. Try not to overdo it. You'll be fine, I'm sure." Naruto smiled at him and turned away. "Well, I've got to go start torturing them. I'll see you later. I'll probably be around more now that I'm an instructor." The man waved at him. "All right then, don't be a stranger. I'll catch up to you again sometime." Naruto had just finished explaining the test to the 3 academy students. They looked up at him with rather blank expressions. He started the timer and crossed his arms. "All right now, you've got about 2 hours to get the bells away from me. Whoever doesn't have a bell when the timer goes off fails. If you don't go all out and use killing force, you'll fail for sure. Anytime you're ready we can begin. You may use kunai and any weapons you might have." Hanabi jumped up and rushed at him without a word. It almost caught him off guard. The girl moved to attack with a blank expression on her face, poking at him with her palms open using her fingers to strike. Chakra flowed through her towards her hands and her strikes were carefully aimed. Naruto countered the strikes and blocked easily, keeping her from striking his pressure points easily even on his blocking limbs. She was pretty skilled, but she wasn't Neji either. He had no difficulty holding her off and stayed in place as she rushed and jumped around him, looking for any opening she could find. Konohamaru frowned at Midori. The girl was a bit shocked and wasn't quite sure what to do. Wow, she just attacked him. Sorry, but only 2 of us can pass and all. She's way cuter than you are, I hope you understand. The boy ran towards the fray. Cute? You pervert. Snapped Midori in irritation. That jerk, this is why he didn't want us to eat. I can't believe this stupid test. Konohamaru had a kunai in his hand as he jumped at Naruto from behind. The blonde ninja spun around and kicked him in the gut. He put his hand on Hanabi's head and flipped over her. The girl gasped in surprise as she found herself with her fist in Konohamaru's belly. Ouch, grumbled the boy a little sourly. He didn't think anything of it, and she didn't seem to either as she ignored him and turned to attack again. The boy put his hand on her shoulder to stop her for a moment and she glared at him looking annoyed. Hey, look. I'm gonna try to steal those bells while you keep him distracted. Help me, and I'll give you one. I'd rather end up with you than with that mouth with legs. She scowled and turned her head towards Naruto without bothering to respond and dashed away as she charged him. Well, isn't she friendly? Grumbled the boy. He moved off looking for cover and trying to shift to Naruto's blind side. His former tutor turned instructor was wise to it though, and kept him in sight. Midori screamed as she jumped at the older boy with both her feet aimed at the back of his head. The Junin just shifted aside and extended his arm, clotheslining her as she sailed past him. The blonde squatted down next to her and narrowed his eyes. Why are you screaming? She tried to punch him in the face and he hopped up out of the way. Hanabi missed trying to strike at his back as he went over her head and landed behind her, and she tripped over the fallen girl landing face first in the grass. Naruto stuck his arm back behind him and put his palm against Konohamaru's head. The boy slashed at him with a kunai from behind and missed. The instructor looked back at him and smiled. Hey. You've been practicing, I see. I almost didn't notice you that time. He shoved and the boy ended up on his back. About 2 hours later, Midori was tied to the wooden post and looked very annoyed. That bastard. I'll kill him. Konohamaru was eating one of the 2 meals that their instructor had brought with him. Huh? No way. You couldn't even kill him if he let you. Bro sensei is real strong. Hanabi had the other meal and didn't say anything. She looked focused and was contemplating her next move. Her opponent was nearly impossible to hit, and she only had one more chance to get a bell. Konohamaru gave a heavy sigh and offered the unfinished portion of his meal to Midori. Here. Eat something, would you? Hanabi frowned at him. We're not supposed to. Sensei said. The boy frowned at her. Hey. We all need strength. In case you haven't figured it out yet, we're going to have to work together to get those bells. None of us is going to get one unless all 3 of us are working together. The white-eyed girl gasped and got a little wide-eyed. But. You'll get in trouble. Midori turned her nose up. Just eat it. Konohamaru shoved it in her chest. Shut up and eat. You're no good to us if you're weak from hunger. We're gonna have to come up with a plan. Besides, Bro Sensei always told me that a ninja that doesn't look after their companions is lower than trash. He glanced over at the dark-haired girl and narrowed his eyes a little. Unless you really think you can take him by yourself? He cut Midori's bindings and the brunette girl looked flushed and uncertain. You'll get in trouble if you get caught helping me. He told us that if you give me any food, you fail. Her tone was actually a little subdued. She was very hungry, but didn't want to cause them both to fail with her. It was obvious to her that she wouldn't pass the exam. It left her feeling a little depressed and she didn't look at either of them. Hanabi had stood against the Junin better than she had, and Konohamaru had come closer than either of them to landing a blow several times. Hanabi hung her head and offered her lunch to Midori as well. He's right. We're going to have to think of something. He's already been trying to sneak up on him while he's been distracted by the two of us, and he's come closer than either of us. It might work if we're both working together to keep his attention. Well, that's a good plan. It wouldn't work as well as you're hoping, but it's nice to know you can think things through. The trio all gasped and turned their heads up. Naruto was sitting on one of the branches in the trees above them. He was lounging in a very relaxed position, and had in fact been there the whole time. The trio had been fighting one of his clones. Konohamaru blinked and worked his mouth open and closed. Hanabi almost dropped her food, but Midori caught it. The brunette girl started eating, figuring they'd been caught red-handed anyway. The blonde ninja looked up at the leaves above his head. You all pass by the way. Konohamaru is right. As a ninja team, you've got to be able to count on each other. He sat up and turned with his legs hanging off the branch and looked down at them. A ninja who is only out for themselves is worthless. A danger to their team and their mission. He was the only one who saw more than just a bell for himself in that fight. You two girls were focused on getting one of your own. It was easy to deal with you. He was using you as a distraction, but he also tried to help you both out. Striking when it gave you both an advantage in the hope that at least one of you might be able to get a strike in and steal one of the bells. The two girls both looked towards the dark-haired boy in surprise. He looked back at them and shrugged. I figured I'd end up with at least one of you anyway. Midori scowled at him. Don't put it that way. He shrugged at her. Sorry, Hanabi is much cuter and less annoying. That's why I helped her out more. The Hyuga girl ignored him. Sensei, this was all a deception then? The blonde nodded. Of course, more than you think in fact. We're ninja after all. If you're in a fair fight, you've already failed. Another Naruto spoke up from behind them. Even if you'd managed to beat me, you still wouldn't have gotten a bell from me. The two girls looked surprised. Konohamaru scowled. What? You mean we've been fighting a stupid clone? That's dirty. Cried Midori. Not very honorable, muttered Hanabi as she looked annoyed as well. Thank you. If you wanted honor, you should have become a samurai. Naruto reached up and pulled down. Another Konohamaru landed on the ground next to himself, causing both girls to jump back. Rats, grumbled the boy as he scratched his head in stereo. I didn't think you noticed me. Naruto chuckled. You've gotten pretty good at playing dumb, Konohamaru. Huh? Two of him? Muttered Midori in confusion. Wait a minute. Her eyes went wide and she gasped. That time. And then. That other time. And. She whirled around and glared at him. I knew it. You asshole. I'll kill you. Naruto landed between them as the two clones vanished. He put his hands on her shoulders. Now, you can get him back later. For now, you should celebrate passing your exam. Starting tomorrow, we start taking missions as a genin team. She calmed and looked up at him. So, we all pass then? Father will be pleased, said Hanabi without smiling. That was easier than I though, said Konohamaru as he crossed his arms. I already had a plan worked out and everything though. Oh well. Naruto released the girl as she seemed to have calmed. Yes, well. Don't expect anything terribly exciting for a while. You're ninja, but you're still genin. We'll probably be doing D-ranked missions for a long time. Alright, we're done for today. Meet me here tomorrow at 9, and we'll get started on your first assignment. The children all rushed away, leaving him standing in the field where he'd become a genin by himself. Well, that was all the excitement I'm likely to see for a while. That damn cat again? Grumbled Naruto. That's right, replied Tsunade as she smirked at him. The daimyo's wife's cat has run off again. Run off? He replied. I'm starting to think she lets it go just so the genin can catch it. This happens every time they come to Konoha. The Hokage ignored him. He'd like to speak with you this evening. The boy nodded. I see. You've made arrangements, I take it? She nodded and smiled. Yes. You'll meet with him in the executive quarters. Stop by my office once the mission is complete and I'll bring you by. He nodded and turned away. All right then. I should go and collect my team then. He gave a small sigh as he left the office. If the Hokage's wife wasn't such a nice woman, he'd consider turning into a fox and eating the damn cat. Oh well. At least it's not me this time. He's running late, complained Midori. Under her forehead protector, she scratched at her forehead. She wasn't accustomed to wearing it yet, and it stung a little. Hanabi said, "Sensei isn't very punctual." Her expression was far less irritated than the older girl's. Konohamaru nodded and appeared to be at ease. "I suppose. Not to worry, today is our first mission. What will it be, I wonder?" As he approached the group, Naruto warned them not to get too excited. "You'll only be disappointed." Midori yelled, "You're late." "I got lost on the road of life," the Junin remarked, looking at her with only half an eye. "So what's the mission, bro-sensei?" Konohamaru puffed out his chest and spoke. With a photo extracted from his shirt, the blonde extended it towards them. "A cat?" Hanabi inquired. Their teacher said, "That's correct. This cat needs to be located and captured. It must be safely returned to the daimyo's wife, as it is her property." Head cocked, Konohamaru did so. "That's it?" Midori grimaced. "That's lame." "I'll try my hardest," Hanabi resolutely declared. The blonde gave the three a nod. "Acclimate to it. You won't see much more excitement than this for a while. Come on, please." The cat took roughly 3 hours to locate and apprehend. It was Hanabi who eventually took possession of it. She struck a pressure point on its back and paralyzed it, but it did not suffer any damage. It was brought back by the genin and given back to its owner. She was a big woman with a contagious smile on her face all the time. When the genin returned it to her, she showered them with praise. Nothing had been done to assist them by Naruto. It had been tracked down by Konohamaru. It had eluded Midori's surprising ability to move unhindered through the dense forest and brush, and Hanabi had been the one to finally corner and capture it. As the woman showered the young ninja with gifts and cookies, Naruto watched on. Hanabi was quiet and reserved but seemed to enjoy the attention. Konohamaru was a little irritated by the attention, and Midori appeared pretty proud of herself. The woman was unaware that Naruto was present. Once they were back on the street, Naruto spoke with them after they had all left. "All right. All of that for now. I'll see you again tomorrow when we have our upcoming task. Probably watching children, assisting with a harvest of some kind, or doing repairs or cleaning around the village." "See you later, sensei," Hanabi bowed. "Later bro-sensei," Konohamaru said, smiling and putting his hands behind his head. With a tiny sigh, Midori nodded. "Yes. I suppose later, sensei." Even now, she hesitated a little to refer to him as her teacher. He headed for the Hokage's office as the other genin all went to walk away. He arrived after a duration of approximately 10 minutes. "Well, they did pretty well, I'd say." Tsunade gave him a smile. "That's excellent. They get along nicely." Midori and Konohamaru are choking each other. Hanabi is a calm, well-mannered person. I would say a bit too much. If not, then sure. Almost exactly. The Hokage leaned back in her chair and interlocked her fingers. For this mission, 3 hours isn't too bad. How did they apprehend her? At that, Naruto appeared a little taken aback. All right, Konohamaru found her. It was he who discovered some fur on some of the bushes and saw her footprints. After pursuing her for a while, Midori drove her to Hanabi, who captured and rendered unconscious. The female laughed. "I see. Have you yet to understand why I added that girl to your team?" "Which one?" Naruto inquired. "I'll interpret that as a rejection then," the woman cryptically answered. "At this time, it is not significant. We need to head to a meeting." The blonde scowled slightly, but didn't pursue the question. "Midori, huh?" He pondered in his head. She was figured as a wildcard by him. He would now need to focus harder and try to understand what Tsunade was saying. In just 5 minutes, he was sitting in front of the daimyo, his 9 tails wagging behind him, and he was covered in golden fur. "Hello once more. It has been some time." The man gave him a smile. "Indeed. I hope everything is good with you. When you were in the nation's capital, you ought to have dropped by to see me." Head cocked, the kitsune did. I mean, I didn't want to bother you. I was there for work. The man gave a nod. What business did you have in Kajishufu? He seemed prickly and spoke in a friendly manner. The creature shrugged. I have people of my own to keep tabs on. Tea in her hands, a large, well-known woman entered the room. The moment she saw the creature, she exclaimed, "Oh. Oh my. Oh. Have you never met my wife?" said the daimyo upon presenting her. The cat that his team had recently returned was petting her legs and became motionless when it saw the bigger creature in the space. It skittered behind her legs, arching its back. Not at all. I doubt that I have. It's enjoyable, he answered. The woman nodded while fixing her wide eyes on him. I didn't believe it. She made a deep bow. My family is in your debt. Naruto's tail was waving. There was no problem. My friends in the garden told me that she is a nice girl and that she treats them very well. A really gregarious person. The daimyo hung his head slightly and nodded. Indeed. It was a very trying experience for all of us. The creature nodded, looking grave. I hope she is well? When his wife laid out the tea, the man nodded. She's getting better. I think you might have prevented her death. I am to realize that the thugs he employed had the intention of killing her. Naruto gave a nod. The man's tone suggested that when he gave the order to kill himself, he already knew that. It's what she informed me. I apologize. I just happened to come upon it in the garden. The kitsune there appeared to be unhappy with her ordeal. They sort of were. But not for reasons that a human could readily comprehend. Kitsune typically associated things with food, reproduction, or good humor. They didn't place much importance on anything else. I chose to investigate and assisted her in getting away. I understand that the following day, he was assassinated. Really, I don't know much about that. The man gave a nod. Indeed. My family is obligated to pay Shadow Realm. My daughter is safe again because of you. Anything you might inquire about. The best with golden hair lifted its ears. You already know what I want. The daimyo gave a nod. I see. Okay, I will present an executive order. It is forbidden to hunt foxes in Fire Country and no fox will ever be hurt there. Naruto slightly lowered his head. You have my gratitude. The man grinned. I do hope we continue to have pleasant relations in the future. I agree, the fox said. The wife of the daimyo gave the thing a nervous little smile. Would you like some tea? Naruto considered it for a while. That would be nice. Once more, he transformed into the youthful, voluptuous blonde. As she poured the cup, the woman shook a little and had wide eyes. Oh my. I found it quite hard to believe. For an additional hour, they sat around and engaged in friendly small talk. Following that, they parted ways, and Naruto once more entered the hallway. He smiled to himself, seeing the guards turn to watch her go. They didn't question her or remove their posts, but they did appear a little perplexed. After disappearing from view, she transformed back into a man and ventured out into Konohagakure's streets. He made his way to his house. He could get some sleep and spend some time with his son while it was still light outside. The following day, he had to rise early in order to embark on a mission with his genin team. With the full moon rising high above her, Hinata Hyuga stood on a hillside. The valley around her was filled with long grass, and a breeze was blowing through it. It looked to her like an ocean in front of her as the blades moved like water. The landscape of Whirlpool has always been chaotic. Large valleys throughout the nation were frequently damaged by strong winds and tornadoes. Long grass grew on any open ground, but the terrain was rocky and its roots penetrated deeply into the gravel that covered most of the ground. Walking in silence in Whirlpool was challenging, but not impossible. An intricate network of springs dotting the terrain was also created by the special ground. It was hard to tell where the waters ended and the grass began when the moon shone directly. The water was dangerous even though it was highly valued worldwide. Strong currents that frequently flowed through the pools gave the nation its name. That night, they would not be traveling. Not even her eyes could make out a distinct path. She didn't need to look over her shoulder. At the top of the hill she stood on, in a little grove of trees, was a large tent. Their mission, a nobleman from Grass Country, was inside. When the other ninja completed their task, he was to be protected and taken to the capital. Kurenai was the only person who might know what that mission entailed, and even she was silent. All she knew was that 2 ninja with the rank of Junin were active within the boundaries. She doubted the Junin would personally appear to inform them when their portion of the mission began, but they would receive word when it did. It would most likely be a message with a code. The girl narrowed her eyes and froze. She said, holding a kunai in her fist, "Who goes there? I can see you quite well. Identify yourselves." She stepped back. 2 males came over. One of them stepped forward and raised his hands, grinning, saying, "We need to speak to Kurenai. Our mission is complete, but there are complications." He had on a Junin vest and a leaf forehead protector. He was accompanied by someone equally unremarkable in appearance. Black hair cut short and attired in black. Though they were unrelated, the two had a slight frown on their faces while conversing. Their chakra was much weaker than most people's, with a deep red color. "What's this I see?" they asked. She nearly collided with her teacher. Kurenai squinted at them. "What is it? Why are you here? We weren't supposed to meet." The person nearest to the 2 kunoichi gave a nod. Yes. The mission was a success. "There's something we need to discuss before you begin your mission." "I'm not fond of this," Hinata muttered, scowling at the 2. "Something is wrong, their chakra seems strange." Kurenai gave her a quick glance. "Well, what is it?" The one in the back said, "It's not for a genin's ears. I'm sure you understand." Curling her fist, Kurenai scowled at Hinata. "Go into the tent and stand guard. Don't let Odiri out of your sight, no matter what." Despite her frown, the girl gave a nod. "Yes, Kurenai-sensei." The 2 Junin got a little closer to the woman, but they remained about 5 feet away, with neither of them attempting to flank her. Their arms were crossed. The more assertive of the 2 observed her leave. "Cute kid. Hyuga, huh? Bet she would have done well." His partner gave a nod. "Yes. We succeeded, the royal family is dead." Kotoga wanted to be rid of them to begin with. They were getting uppity and annoying. Kurenai let out a gasp. All of a sudden, he was standing beside her, his arm around her shoulder. "After we completed our assignment, we were captured." His friend was on her other shoulder as she failed to slash the other with her weapon, saying, "After we were turned by Kashimiro Kotoga, we were quite willing to tell him about the details of our little plan. At any rate, we're to deliver Odiri Sama to him, so he can be used as a pawn, just as the previous royal family was used. It will keep the other countries happy, and keep things as they are. After we're finished here, we're to return to Konohagakure and find out who put us up to this." His partner gave a nod. "I suppose we're fortunate it wasn't Aiden. He would have just killed us very slowly." Kurenai attempted to leap backward from them, but they appeared beside her, holding her arms tightly as they dragged her into the trees encircling the campsite. The 2 opened their mouths wider than they should have been able to, and her eyes widened with fear. The creatures with red eyes sank their teeth into her neck, exposing 2-inch-long fangs. She looked up at the moon, gasping and struggling. She felt herself growing cold, and a single tear trickled down her cheek. I'm sorry, Sarutobi," she said, collapsing to the ground as the 2 Junin freed her and used their hands to similarly wipe their mouths. One of them glared down at her, saying, "Don't forget, there's still more. Odiri is only for Lord Kotoga." With her 2 fellow ninjas, Hinata dashed out the front of the tent. Hinata exclaimed, "This way." Hinata saw the 2 grabbing Kurenai and yanking her away from the tent after hearing the struggle outside. The woman, aware that Hinata could still see what was happening, motioned for her to enter the tent. They were unable to respond quickly enough to what had transpired. The group of 3 came to a stop in front of a terrifying sight. Kurenai's body was being dropped to the ground by the 2 creatures. When one of them spoke, the group of genin focused their eyes on him and listened to what was said. His face went inhuman as he spread his arms and roared, "Let's have some fun. These brats can keep us busy for a while." He bared 2-inch fangs at them as his fingers grew longer and became claws. The girl let out a gasp. "What? No. Though silent, Shino was obviously taken aback. With his loyal companion by his side, Kiba was observing. No way. Growled Akamaru, his hair standing on end. With his shoulder as high as his master's hip, it was far more menacing than it had been as a puppy. The creatures advanced on the kids, snarling and hissing as their arms transformed into wing. Like appendages, and their faces further grew inhumane. Hinata took a single step backward. She could still see their chakra. It was thin and red but still there. This is not. They are not like him. She was terrified and perplexed. She froze, her mind stopping. The creatures were taking their time, prowling around her companions, and neither of them was moving. The three were positioned one behind the other, and the objects were circling them, getting closer as they went. I can't be afraid. I can't be afraid. I don't want to be afraid of him anymore. I can't. I won't die like this. I must be able to face him. Shino and Kiba actually gave a slight head tilt. The last two sentences had been spoken aloud by her, and her voice was not timid or trembling. Her tone had dropped considerably, and she had a stern look on her face. Something gave a mocking hiss and started talking. It seems one may still have some fight left in her. The others are frozen in terror. Not really, Kiba scowled. We're just pissed off about what you've done, and we're thinking about what we're gonna do about it, right Akamaru? The dog snarled at the objects and let out a growl. Shino looked in Hinata's direction. Are you all right? She gave a headshake. No. I've just realized how weak I've become. How can I fight something I'm too afraid to look at? The boy looked up at the two monsters who appeared to be a little confused. Holding little jars in his hands, he removed the cork from one of them. Overcome that fear. With a sly smile, she shut her eyes. She said, right. She held two wooden kunai with silver tips and cores. Kiba laughed. He opened his coat and threw a small vial onto the ground at his feet, saying, hold your breath Akamaru. I know you don't like this, and we're all gonna need a bath later. A hazy, yellowish smoke shot out and engulfed the three. The vampires appeared agitated by the cloud and raised their claws before retreating. One of them barked, what is this? It's garlic gas, the boy said, holding up his nose. We'll stink for 3 days after this, you jerks. You just fucked with the wrong team, you blood-sucking leeches. They plan to fight? Excellent, the other person answered. Much more fun this way. What can a couple of genin do against us? As Hinata moved forward and struck the creature in front of her chest with her open palm, she spoke up. It took off again and ricocheted off a tree. Curling her fingers, she gestured for him to come closer. I'm not going to fight you. I'm going to kick your ass. Kiba's head turned to look at her as he choked. Huh? A black swarm crawled out of Shino's sleeve and into the bottles he was holding as he waved his arms. They swarmed the other creature as they flew out of the opening. Little red welts started to form all over its body, and it let out a painful shriek. He thrashed against the insects, the wounds beginning to smoke. What is this? Bugs? As his swarm came back to him, Shino turned to face the other, saying, yes, each one holding a small drop of sacred water. It has been blessed, and is quite effective against your kind. It seemed as though the vampire trailing him had been submerged in acid. His muscle and skin collapsed, leaving behind pools of slightly gelled liquid that ate away at the leftovers. Interesting that this training has proved useful. I didn't really expect it. Using the chakra lines of the monster, Hinata closed her eyes. The girl appeared to be moving quite rigidly as she waved her weapons around. Kiba observed the scene with bewilderment. The vampire was traveling quickly. Far more than her capacity would have allowed her to handle. Still, he was deeply confused by what she was doing. She had her weapons where the wards would normally be, and it was a traditional dance. It was a little embarrassing for him to realize that Hinata had demanded that they prepare for exorcism by learning an ancient dance. She had been doing it for her entire life. In some of the more illustrious families, it was somewhat of a custom for girls to learn traditional dance. In an attempt to make their daughters more appealing to those kinds of families as they grew older, many parents forced it on them. Typically, men didn't do it. That was viewed as unmanly. Kurenai had yielded quite readily. She probably found it humorous, but it's also possible that the dance training improved her ability to control her chakras. Additionally, the two kunoichi were made to swear that they would never disclose that they had received training in traditional exorcism dance. Shino had joined him in protest, each claiming that the idea was against them because it's a guy thing. Kurenai had explained that any other type of training they would need to undergo would be done in the most agonizing way possible, which led to the compromise. The training was adored by Hinata. She had always loved the dance because it reminded her of her happy childhood. Everyone knew Hinata was the best of the Hyuga girls, who performed the dance as part of formal celebrations within the clan. Although it was something that young girls did, her mother had also experienced it, and they had outgrown the dances. Though Kurenai knew the dance from her own childhood days as well, Hinata was superior. The Hyuga were not like most other families in that they took this tradition very seriously. Kiba and Shino both had surprised expressions. She moved a little more quickly than usual, but it was still clearly her. The thing came at her with claws and slashes, but even at its much faster speed, it always missed. It growled and lunged at her, saying, "Little brat, how are you doing this? I'll drain you dry." The girl opened her eyes and regarded it with a severe expression. "For Kurenai. Sensei, I banish you." Her weapon had pushed through his chest and into his heart as the thing snapped its jaws at her. Its chest emitted an orange light, turning the surrounding area gray. After retreating for about 2 seconds, the creature turned into an ash cloud. Gripping her weapons, the girl let her arms hang loose. "It seems we will be very dusty when this is finished." Kiba let out a gasp. "What? Are you crazy? We've got to get out of here. We don't have a Junin, and we can't protect this guy in a place like this." He remained composed and appeared serious. "Look, I'm not saying we abandon him, but we should take him back and get some backup here. This is too much for us." Shino turned to see his master sprawled out on the ground. "We finished the mission." The other boy turned to look. His head hung, and he sighed, "Right. I wasn't thinking. We can't let that be for nothing." A few tears trickled down his cheeks, part from the gas he let out and part from his overwhelming emotions. For humans, it was mildly irritating. "So, now what? Did you see those things? We're probably going to die here if we try to complete this mission on our own." Shino gave a nod. "For this, I'm willing to accept that." Hinata gave both of them a scowl. "We have to finish her." The two boys turned to face her. "Huh?" Kiba exclaimed, his mouth hanging open. "What do you mean?" The girl moved to the side of their instructor's body and collapsed to her knees. She covered the woman's chest with one of her weapons. "Kurenai. Sensei. I'm sorry. Hey. What are you?" Kiba asked, looking surprised. "Don't be," the woman turned her head and answered. Her expression turned savage, and she seized the girl by the nape of her neck. Her fingers moved away from Hinata as she said, "Thank you." Her weapon was hidden deep within the girl's chest. She was burning just as slowly as the other had. She seemed to crumble into dust as she said, "Tell Asuma, I'm sorry, and I love him. Get out of here, go back to Konohagakure." "That's an order." With a sniffle, Hinata touched her nose. "It's too late for that." With a growl, Kiba cast a glance down at Akamaru, who was still growling. He turned to face the tent and said, "You heard her. We've got orders. We should get going." "That slug, I bet he slept through the whole mess." Shino sighed. "He's right. It's time to go. Now that we have orders, we should follow them." It was her last to us. The girl gave a headshake. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her expression remained stern. "No. I mean, while this was happening, we were surrounded. There are many, closing fast." Shino and Kiba instantly woke up. As Akamaru began to bark and scan the area around the tree line, Kiba inquired, "How many?" The girl turned and began running towards the tent, her weapons ready, saying, "About 20, we need to get to the tent quickly. They're circling Odiri, not us." Her teammates both proceeded in the same way. "Get him out quickly, we don't want to get caught inside the tent. They could just bring it down on us and trap us." Shino gave a nod. "Then we should not enter, but protect the entrances. Akamaru should go inside as well, he's not suited to this enemy." We don't know what might happen if he's bitten. Kiba nodded while lowering his gaze slightly. You're right, but I'm less effective without him. Hinata nodded emphatically. So, we have our plan then. We should form a triangle around the tent, so each of us can see two of the others. If one of us goes down, we'll have to consider retreat. That means one of us will have to go inside and try to retrieve Odiri while the other covers him. Then try to break the line together and escape. At that, the shorter boy snorted. Huh? I guess that works. What's gotten into you? I don't know what to think of Uzumaki anymore. He is not one of these creatures, though he is born of darkness. I cannot say I trust him, and I think he's a monster of some kind, but I've read his book, replied the young woman. You should have studied more, maybe then you might have understood some of it. Shino laughed snortingly. Without glancing at Hinata, he said, I think I kind of like her like this. It is odd though. You should know we'll be keeping an eye on you. You are acting strange. Jerk, Kiba muttered as he took his place. Akamaru, into the tent and protect Odiri. Don't let anyone touch him but us. The dog trotted into the tent, hanging his head and tucking his tail between his legs. He was lying close to the man's cot, who was snoring slightly while lying on his side. He was a thin young man with a thin face and golden curls in his hair. Beneath his scraggly, puckered mustache, there was a tiny black dot on his cheek. The dog was lying on his side with the flap open, allowing him to see his master. He looked on, shifting and letting out a low growl. I apologize, friend, the boy moaned. He was sick to his stomach, but he understood. In that case, Akamaru might cause more harm than good. He was a little concerned about the dog's endurance before charging in against his orders to stay put. Akamaru was going to show up if he got into too much trouble. That gave him more anxiety than it did relief. He turned to face Hinata with a quick glance to his right. The girl no longer appeared in the least bit scared, and she had a serious frown on her face. But the girl was far from emotionless. A fire was blazing in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Despite what they were up against, she remained composed and attentive. They all possessed weapons capable of eliminating these creatures. Hinata had made them do it, and she always carried extras in case they misplaced or forgot. Although she didn't use force, it was still difficult to refuse her. In the trees around them, he could see their eyes. Huh. Who would have thought I'd be grateful for it? He said. Until dawn, the ninja were stranded in the forest. The tall grass outside the woods would be a death trap for them. We're going to have to hold out here all night, aren't we? He had vials of liquids in his fingers and was already surrounded by Shino's swarm. He knew Hinata had saved their lives that evening, too, so he said, I'm afraid so. It isn't safe to wander about the grasslands even without the threat the vampires present. Even though Kiba and he were both well prepared, she was a living weapon against such malevolence. Though he wasn't positive, he thought he saw her flash a small, sinister smile right before the attack. Neither vampires nor ninjas would soon forget that night. First blood went to Hinata. She closed her eyes and started to dance. Unlike the previous one she had used, this one held her in a circle around a central point on the ground. Suddenly, 7 vampires surrounded her. Despite appearing to be out of their reach, she used a pair of silver kunai to stab them when their attacks left them vulnerable. Shino and Kiba were using weapons with silver etched on the blades, but Kiba's weapons were made entirely of metal. Her attacks caused the creatures to instantly turn to ash. The first to attack was stabbed under the arm and into the ribcage by her. When it attempted to tackle her, she stopped its charge by stabbing it in the forehead and freed the first weapon from its skull by stabbing him in the chest. She made the same turn and struck the person attempting to jump on top of her in the chest with both weapons. In an instant, she swiftly maneuvered between two of them, causing their heads to collide on either side of her. Shino was able to defend his position with relative ease. His insects kept the way ahead blocked and swung at anything that got too close. 3 of them he had already liquefied, and the 4th was standing there hissing and snarling at him by himself. 2 of the monsters screamed in pain and rage as they fell on either side of him as the wall moved. The things had attempted to swoop down on him and sprout wings. He did have a little less protection now, and the vampire who was grounded attempted to charge. It was a foolish move, for the swarm surrounded him and left the 2 monsters on the ground. This briefly exposed Shino as his swarm eliminated the creatures. It took him some time to kill them, but he could easily render them incapacitated. His bottles were halfway empty, he noticed. Nothing more was moving on his position, but he had to keep it under watch. Kiba wasn't just sitting there doing nothing. Despite the monster's speed, his gas bombs prevented them from approaching him. It was painful for them to try, and it slowed them down considerably, but they could get through it to him. For them, the garlic gas was much more than an annoyance. If their flesh came into contact with it, it blistered and bubbled. He scowled as he held his kunai with the silver engravings in his hands. Come on, let's finish this quickly. There were only 4 of them, and the gas cloud was beginning to fade and 2 of them were on its edge. He had to use caution because there weren't many of those bombs left. When the gas dwindled, the effects did not simply disappear. They were stumbling a little and struggling to focus on him. The 2 who appeared to be the most damaged roared at him as he rushed them. Without pausing, the boy pressed his kunai into one of their chests with 2 hands. After turning and giving the other a chest kick, he returned and plunged the same weapon into its heart. He just tossed the weapon, and it went straight through the third's chest, even though it growled and retreated. The 4th took hold of both his head and arm. He tried to retrieve another weapon from his belt with his free hand, but he was not quick enough. The thing began to burn away, clamping its mouth down on his arm. His eyes widened as he collapsed to his knees, holding his arm, and saw only a bloody stump for support. He screamed and collapsed onto his side, right next to a skinny pale pair of legs. He was going pale and gasping. He had Hinata by his side, putting a belt around his amputated arm. As she did this, the boy's gaze strayed and he appeared perplexed. Beside her lay a bloody tanto knife on the ground. The handle bore the Hyuga seal. With force, Hinata yanked the boy to his feet. She pulled him toward the outside campfire, took up a log, placed her knee over his chest, and shoved a stick into his mouth. Kiba's eyes widened as the girl removed one of the burning logs and applied pressure to the open wound. As she did so, he started screaming again and started crying. She paused for a moment, checking the wound, and then removed her leg from him. She extended her arm to her side and withdrew a pouch. He watched in silent horror as she started to clean and bandage his severed arm. You cut off my arm?" He was pale and sweating. "Yes," replied Hinata simply. "You're tougher than I thought." "I'd have passed out by now," commented Shino. "Since you've abandoned your post, I suspect we are currently vampire-free?" The girl looked very focused and serious as she tended to Kiba. "My eyes aren't as good as Neji's, but there are none nearby. There may be more out in the grass, we can't let our guard down." "Where's Akamaru?" grumbled Kiba as he looked around. Hinata gave him a small smile. "I threw a small gas pellet into the tent before this started. He's fine, but he's sleeping. He'll wake up with Odiri in the morning. I didn't want the noise to wake Odiri up and have him wander out here in the middle of it. I know you wanted Akamaru safe, he'll be fine." "Thank why? Wait, you cut off my arm." The injured boy let his head fall back and he scowled. Hinata gave him a shove in his chest. "What? You'd rather be a vampire? You saw what happened." Her eyes became glazed over. Kiba grabbed her shoulder. "I know. It sucks, so I'm giving you a hard time about it. I owe you, but I'm not gonna let you forget it anytime soon either." He actually smiled a bit. "Got anything in there to knock me out?" She smiled at him in a faint and somewhat lost manner. "Yeah. I put it on your wound. At least you don't have to suffer with the horrible taste." "Good," muttered the boy as his eyes started to close. His arm was numb by that point and he could feel the pull of the drug drawing him into sleep. "Not really," replied the girl after he passed out. "We're in real trouble. Shino and I might be able to repel another attack, but..." "Then what?" Shino nodded. "We'll be fine. Between your eyes and my insects, we shouldn't be surprised. This worries me though. Kurenai's last words were for us to abandon the mission. I do not look forward to relaying her message to Asuma, but I feel it is something we should do." The girl hugged her torso and shivered. "What's our plan then?" She didn't look afraid, just a bit disturbed. "Well, we go back the way we came. Odiri shouldn't be that hard to convince. There are no bodies here, but we don't need to explain the particulars. We've lost our Junin to an attack, and we were ordered to return to Konohagakure. That's all we need to tell him. Shino gave a small sigh. We'll have to be careful, but I think we can make it. Hinata looked at the tent. We won't make it. Not for 3 nights. I don't have enough gas to keep Akamaru knocked out. He'd have been in that fight if I hadn't done it. If we lose Akamaru, I'm betting we'll lose Kiba. It's a 3-day trip, and there's no guarantee they'll respect Whirlpool's borders. The ninja arched his eyebrow. What do you suggest? The one who can do the most damage remains. I'll distract them while you get Odiri and Kiba back to Konohagakure. The girl looked over at him. It's the only chance we've got. We're not leaving you here alone, said Shino as he puffed himself up and looked stern. I don't plan on dying, replied the girl. She looked away from him. Why? You're serious, aren't you? Once again he was surprised. What's gotten into you? The kunoichi looked at him. I'm afraid that I'll spend the rest of my life in fear. I can't do that. I'll keep them distracted, make a big mess, and meet up with you back at the village. He didn't look impressed. How do you plan on doing that exactly? Just a moment ago you were saying we wouldn't last 3 days. No. All of us couldn't hold a defensive position for 3 nights in this place. You and I would likely have survived, but we'd lose everyone else before we escaped. She looked thoughtful. I should be able to stir up trouble and keep them occupied for a bit. You're pretty confident. It's really weird, but I can't say it's not an improvement. I have to admit though, it's got me a little worried. Since when are you this cocky? Take these things on alone for 3 days? Shino actually raised his voice a little. Who are you kidding? I saw what you did, but it wasn't that impressive. We don't know how many of these things there are. The girl nodded. In order to end this, I only have to kill one. Trouble is, he's likely to be hard to get to. Huh? Shino was confused out of his rising temper. What do you mean? Destroy the one who made a vampire, and you destroy all those he has made. It becomes something of a chain reaction if you kill the right one. A few of his older and more powerful children might survive, but it will clear up an infestation if there is one. We may have slain quite a few tonight, depending on how many this group has turned. Hinata glanced at him. I found it in an old scroll about vampires. It's been accurate up to now. At least I know Uzumaki isn't a vampire. He's different from these things somehow. There are scrolls for all sorts of things in the library at the academy. Werewolves, kappa, dragons, demons. Shino turned his head away from her. Dragons? Do you really think we might run into a dragon? Are you going to tell me you still don't believe in monsters? She replied dryly. He hung his head a little. You've got a point. You've gotten pretty talkative, commented Hinata. You've gotten pretty brave. I'm not leaving you. You're not in your right mind, and I'm not so sure you won't go back to how you used to be once you're off on your own. He looked at the tree line. The girl frowned at him. I won't. I'll make them suffer, for Kurenai-sensei. He saw the anger in her eyes. Even more reason to say no. You've got no choice, she replied. I'm going the other way tomorrow. You've got orders and you can't follow me. Kiba won't make it, he's injured. Even with Akamaru helping him out, he can't get Odiri to the border. He needs help escaping more than that noble does. You do your duty. Revenge won't bring her back, said Shino as he became firm again. I'm not doing it for revenge. I'm angry at them, but you and I both know damn well that the two of us are the only ones with any hope of surviving that trip. It's the only way to complete our mission. You haven't got enough blessed water left to do it yourself. There was a temple in that last town we passed through, get more from there before you pass. I'm sure they'll oblige you as much as you wish. I'm going, you're not. She walked away from him and looked out into the night for signs of trouble. Shino was frustrated. She was right, there wasn't much he could do. You realize you're going rogue? Hinata, you could get into a lot of trouble if this goes wrong. You might even become a missing nin. She glanced back at him with a stern look on her face. I don't care. I'm looking out for my team. She turned away. Stop looking at me that way. I know you want to do it yourself. Don't think I don't know I was just the one who said it first. He nodded. It's surprising. It's got me a bit worried. If one of us is to die, it should be me. Like you said, I'm getting low on blessed water. I may only be of limited use. We'll have to survive at least one more night to make it back to that town. She didn't look at him again and scanned the trees. See, there's the problem. You know you'll die. Besides, you are better suited to defend against them than attack. I killed more, but none of them got close to you. And you don't? He replied. I told you already, I don't plan on dying. She put her hands behind her head and looked up at the stars. That makes me the better choice. I'm not sure if I believe you, but it worries me either way. Shino gave a small sigh. He wanted to say more, but left it at that. She seemed to want solitude. He could understand that, they had both lost someone important to them. Kurenai was dead, and it hadn't quite sunk in for any of them yet. He found himself having to force his eyes away from that part of the forest. It would be dangerous if he lost track of himself looking at it. I see, Odiri had a frown on his face. So, we are to return to Konohagakure? Our mission has failed? He was a tall, thin man with blonde hair and a small curled mustache. He looked very serious, the most any of the young ninja had seen him. He had been kind of a pain before. He was unused to the outdoors and prone to complaining. He also talked quite a bit, most of it bragging about places he'd been and comforts he had at home. He had just woken up. Kiba was sitting with his good arm around Akamaru's neck. The dog kept trying to put his nose into his stump, and he had to push him off to keep him away from it. The animal whimpered a bit, and the nobleman smiled at him. Chin up. We'll be all right. The boy was on mild painkillers. I'll be fine. Just, don't bug me. I'm in a bad mood because of it. Shino gave a sigh and shook his head. We'll be leaving shortly. The sun is up, and we'll be safe enough till nightfall. I'm afraid we won't be getting much sleep. We can't travel at night, but we must be on guard. That is the most likely time for an attack. Hinata was standing next to the flap of the tent and looking out across the grass. Kiba noticed it and frowned. What's with her? Shino looked away. Don't worry about it. We've got a long trip. The injured boy frowned. Hey. It sounds like you don't want to say something. What's up? I'm not coming with you, replied Hinata simply. She didn't look back at them and seemed calm. What? Said Kiba and Odiri at the same time. Shino crossed his arms. We won't make it without a distraction. Hinata and I talked about it last night. I don't like it, but she's right. We've got to leave someone here to try and keep their attention while the rest of us slip away. They'll be after us when night falls again. We can't leave her. Snarled Kiba as he jumped up. It's not the ninja way to leave people behind. Yes, it is, replied the girl simply. We do what we must to complete our mission. Kurenai sensei's last order to us is to return to Konohagakure with Odiri. We won't make it if we try to hold out for 3 nights. They will wear us down and kill us one by one. This is our only option. As ninja, we must do our duty. Mine is to remain behind and keep them away from you as best I can. I've got the best chance of surviving and making it back on my own out of the 3 of us. It sounded like you planned a bit more than that, replied Shino with a small snort. I cannot bear such a shame. I shall not leave without this young lady. Do you have any idea what people would say if they found out I left a teenage girl behind in a place like this? Odiri was wide-eyed and slack-jawed. You must return with us, one of the others should remain if that is our only course. Yeah, kind of, muttered Kiba in a sort of half-agreement. Akamaru barked and wagged his tail violently. I'm not asking permission, replied the girl as she walked out. I'll see you back in Konohagakure. There's no reason for me to wait any longer. Hey. Wait. Cried Kiba as he started after her. He almost ran into Shino. The taller boy adjusted his glasses. Hey. She's gotten interesting. It's a shame she's leaving now. Get out of the way. Snarled Kiba as he waved his arm at him. No. I like this as much as you do, but Hinata is the one with the best chance of surviving. My supply of blessed water is getting low, I wouldn't last long enough to do us much good. You've lost an arm, and Akamaru is useless against this kind of enemy. He looked at the exit. Hinata stays, I won't hear any argument from either of you. If I have to tie him up and drag him by force, I'm taking Odiri back to Konohagakure. The nobleman looked frustrated and crossed his arms. It seems I have been forced to abandon the young lady. I'll have no part of any blame if anything happens to her. Shino scowled, but the man couldn't tell because of his glasses and coat. Your honor will remain intact. I'm the acting leader of this team for now. It's my decision, and I'll take full responsibility. Odiri still didn't look pleased, but relented. Very well. I'll not hear a word of this spoken to anyone else. Abandoning a girl in a place like this? It's shameful. Kiba was snarling a little, but was getting annoyed with Odiri as well. He was more worried about covering his ass than he was about Hinata. He had little doubt that if the man ever spoke of it, he'd be telling others they had to beat him and tie him up to get him to leave the poor girl on her own. He looked at Shino. I don't like this. Hinata is acting weird, I don't like just leaving her. Shino nodded. I know. We've got no other choice. She made it clear that she was leaving whether any of us liked it or not last night. There's nothing I can really do to stop her, we can't carry her back by force. We'll have our hands full as it is. She refused her orders and we must still follow them. Tayuya scowled at the boy in front of her. What? She was wearing an apron and had a serving tray in her hands in a small restaurant on the main street of Konoha. Sasuke was sitting in one of the booths with his hands folded in front of his face. Shouldn't you smile at customers? The girl leaned in and pointed at his face. I hate you. I'm only here because I have to be. This is my work release job. I can't quit, and I also can't get fired short of burning the place down. Then I'd be back in my cell at least, so I'm considering it. What are you doing here again? Thinking of having my ass mounted on your wall? He shrugged and turned his eyes towards her. That's not a bad idea. You are my first catch, even if you are a bit small. The redhead snarled. I knew it. You're just here to stare at my ass again, you pervert. Stop dropping by. I was coming here long before you showed up, replied the boy. They make good tea, and the gyoza isn't bad. It was better before you started working here because it was quiet. The owner walked up with a smile on his face. He was a kind-looking old man with a balding head and a thick bushy mustache. Ah. Sasuke. It's been a while since I've seen you. How are things? The boy nodded at him and didn't smile. I've been working a lot lately. The man nodded. Yes. We're all quite proud of you. Not the boy who used to come up here and eat his own weight in dried squid snacks anymore, eh? He gave a chuckle and walked away. Sasuke looked annoyed and a little flushed. Tayuya had an evil smirk on her face. So, let's say 250 bags of dried squid then? She pulled out her notepad and looked ready to take his order. Would you like that to go? I'd like that a lot more, because you'd be fucking gone. Just some unsweetened cold tea, to go. He glanced at her. I've got the day off today, so if you sweeten it just to be a twat, I'm going to sit here for a good long time and drink it. Get it right, and I'll just leave. She narrowed her eyes at him. You're a prick. Take your stupid order and get lost. Sasuke Uchiha was leaning against a wall with a small frown on his face. He was in the shadows of Konoha with his unsweetened iced tea in his hand. It was his day off, and he just wanted to be out of his home for a bit. He did it on occasion, and used the opportunity to train his stealth skills. He was out of sight but just off a main road, people were walking by and chatting. He half paid attention to what they were saying. There were a couple of people talking about the Hyuga having difficulties with the Hokage over something. No one seemed aware of exactly what, and it was mostly assumed that the clan had a bit of difficulty adjusting to the new Hokage. It seemed to be settling down, and people were relieved by that. It was the only thing that had caught his attention for a time, but a group of 3 men started by. One of them was a Hyuga, and he had a large grin on his face that seemed unpleasant. He was the tallest of the 3 and had long dark hair that hung to the middle of his back. All 3 of them were dressed in police uniforms. I'm going to make that bitch squeal. Hey. Commented the Hyuga as he appeared to be boasting with his friends. I'm so lucky to have gotten this assignment. The other pair looked a bit nervous about that. One of them was a blonde man who had a smirk before his friend's comment. The other was a short man with short-cut black hair and a stocky build. The shorter one spoke up. I don't know about that. I mean, you could. The Hyuga gave a snort. Get in trouble? The bitch is a prisoner of war. I can do anything and no one will care. The blonde man nodded. He has a point. I say she deserves it. Sound scum. The shorter man cocked his head and gave a small sigh. I see. I heard she was one of the ninja who attempted to assassinate the Hokage. I suppose there's no harm in it. I met her once, and she's a real bitch too. That mouth of hers was downright unladylike. The Hyuga looked pretty smug about it. Yeah. I'm the one responsible for keeping an eye on her. I say the word, and they'll lock her back in a tiny cell. I've got my own personal toy for a while. If she resists, I'll kill her and say she tried to escape. The Uchiha boy narrowed his eyes. He'd kept up with the conversation from behind, following after them as they walked by. He'd heard enough and let them go. A moment later he was leaning against the wall again as before. He sipped at his tea again and scratched the side of his head. After a moment of thought he shrugged and sipped at his drink, continuing to watch people go by on the street. Ooh. It was early evening. Inside a small rundown shack in Konohagakure a rather unpleasant scene played out. You heard me, bitch. Take your clothes off. Now. You want me to throw you into a cell? Tayuya scowled as she stood up and glared at the ninja before her. No. The pair were facing off in the small shack the girl now lived in. I'm not going to do that. She was by a small wooden table in the main room. There was a small bedroom and another door to a toilet and small shower behind her. We'll see, said the Hyuga with a scowl on his face. I'll get what I want. I could just kill you, say you were trying to escape and I caught you in the act. It would be easy, and no one would question it. The girl shrugged. Go ahead, fucktard. I could care less. You think I want to live in this little slice of fucking hell you've given me? Fuck off. Kill me and be done with it. I'm already dead. The man snarled. You bitch. I'll make you show some respect. I wouldn't recommend moving, if you want to keep your head. A soft voice spoke up as the man froze in his tracks. Sasuke was standing beside him with his sword across the man's throat. A little blood dripped down the man's throat and he backed away with wide eyes. Who? Anbu? What are? He narrowed his eyes. It doesn't matter. This is police jurisdiction. You've got no say in the matter. He stood up tall and frowned at him. You should leave now. I could have you in chains for what you have done as it is. Assaulting an officer and interrupting the performance of his duties. Tayuya was standing behind her chair and gripping it. Her face had gone red and her eyes bloodshot. What the fuck are you doing here? Asshole. Get lost. I don't need your help. Shut up, replied the boy in a calm and quiet tone. I'm not here to help you. I overheard what this coward was planning while he was running his mouth about it on the street. She seethed and seemed to grind her teeth as she became angrier. So fucking what? I told you I don't want your help. Let him kill me. It will be a fucking relief. The man smirked at the young ninja. You're not wanted here. Get lost. There's nothing you can do, even as an ANBU, you can't touch me. No one will believe you if she doesn't speak up, and I doubt that will happen. She's pretty angry, maybe she even wants it. What do you care? Isn't part of your job killing Sound Ninja? Sasuke shook his head. Actually, I do have the authority to kill you. I am a hand of the Hokage. I have more than enough to justify my case. I would have to report my reasons to her, and that would be the end of it. I'll remind you she's a woman and doesn't approve of this sort of behavior at all. The man snarled. What? Boy, you don't know what it is you are messing with. I'm on the police force. We look out for our own. He took a combat-ready stance and narrowed his eyes. If you fight back, it will only add to the charges against you. Sasuke shook his head. Well, there is that. Plus, my team has had issues with the Hyuga recently. Wouldn't want to compound the problem. He rubbed on his chin. Tayuya tossed a plate at him and the boy ducked. It was metal and bounced off the wall behind him. Yeah. So get lost, you fucking pervert. Sasuke cocked his head at that. I think my old boss was a bad influence on me. He couldn't honestly deny that charge as he'd ended up at the Fox Den after overhearing the plot to try to calm himself down a little and mull over what to do about it, if anything. You're not taking me seriously? Roared the man in anger as he realized the Anbu wasn't paying attention to him. Stop. The man froze as men started to walk into the room from the door behind him. The chief of police was glaring at him with the Byakugan in a very stern look. I think I've seen about enough. He turned to Sasuke. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. He then looked at the man again and gave a cruel-looking smirk. I just saved your life. He was right, he does have the authority to eliminate you without involving us, and if he had we never would have found your body. Sir. Stammered the man in shock. I. He had gone very pale and closed his mouth to swallow hard. Sasuke started to walk away. Well, I'll let you handle it then. I didn't want your help. Snapped Tayuya at him. He's a bad cop, and I want him off the streets of Konoha. This is my home, and I can't trust scum like this to protect it. He passed the police chief and walked into the night. I could give a shit about a bad-tempered brat like you. Fucking prick. Snarled Tayuya. Stay the hell away from me. The police chief frowned at her. You should show more gratitude. She scowled at him. For what? He's the reason I'm stuck here like this in the first place. You want me to thank him for capturing me? Fuck off, old man. I'd rather just have you assholes execute me and be done with it. He sighed and shook his head as the men with him took the stammering soon-to-be former cop into custody. He turned and left the home. Why not just end it yourself? She turned her head and glared at the wall. I'm too much of a coward. The man nodded. Maybe that's how you ended up here. You shouldn't blame us for that. Her head snapped around and the door closed just in time to have a vase shatter against it. You prick. Boo. What the hell are you doing here? Tayuya scowled at the boy standing in her doorway the next morning. It was nearing afternoon, but he'd woken her up anyway. Her new job kept her up late and she slept through most of the day. The prisoner was not very pleased at having an early visitor as it was. Who it was just made things worse. Sasuke looked annoyed. You're my prisoner. When I got rid of that cop, responsibility for you fell into my lap again. I have to keep an eye on you until the mess is cleared up and they can assign someone else to watch you. Shouldn't be more than a few days or so. What? Said the girl as her eyes went wide. Relax. I just have to pop in sometimes and make sure you're where you're supposed to be. I don't plan on talking to you if I can help it. He crossed his arms and didn't look pleased. It's annoying, and my job takes up quite a bit of my time. I don't like this either. I might not have done it if I'd realized how much trouble it was going to be. In other words, you'll be popping in all the fucking time, staring at my ass, and watching me shower and shit, while stroking your tiny deformed penis in the dark where I can't see you. She looked livid. He seemed to think about that. Yeah. He nodded and shrugged. It's only temporary. I'm going to make sure someone else gets stuck with dealing with you as fast as I can manage, believe me. She slugged him across his jaw. No way. It's not worth it. Kill me, because I'm not going to stand for it. I'll kill you if you don't. She screamed and dove at him. Do you ever shut up? He groused as he sidestepped with his hands in his pockets. It sucks for both of us. I don't like you either. You're a foul-mouthed, bad-tempered twat. You're an emotionless dipshit and you look like a friggin' girl. She responded as she dove at him again. He grabbed her wrists and pulled her arms up to catch her as she dove. Knock it off, will ya? He craned his neck as she attempted to headbutt and bite him. I'm just gonna go until you calm down. Later. She jerked one hand free from his grip and snapped at his face with her teeth. Sasuke couldn't dodge in time and she clamped down on his bottom lip. His grunt of pain was muffled by her face as she managed to get her other hand free and push against his shoulders. Her teeth scraped against his lip as she pulled back, but nothing came off. He was left with a bloody lip and a surprised expression on his face. He'd actually gotten off easy considering what she'd done. Ouch. He cried after she pulled away with an angry snarl on her face. That hurt you, cunt. He had managed to get a hold of her wrists again and she pulled and tugged lightly to try and free her hands again. You bitch, you bit me. Tayuya jabbed her head at him again and stepped on his foot as she did so, preventing him from backing off to dodge. His grip had gone loose again and she pulled her hands free, wrapping them over his shoulders as she turned her head a little. Sasuke put his hands on her sides and didn't push her off, mostly because she had her tongue in his mouth. The girl broke off and snarled again. Did you like that? Because it isn't. He put his finger over her lips and looked at her with a bit of a daze in his eyes. Look. I've got a thing for red hair, so just shut the hell up and keep going. He kissed her again. She broke off and turned her eyes away from him with a blush on her cheeks. Fair enough. I'm not a virgin. Don't go expecting me to be all giggly and shit. I can tell already you're going to be a shitty lay. I'm just horny, so don't go thinking. My old boss owns a brothel, he replied with a shrug. I get services there for free, whenever I want. What? The girl got wide-eyed. No way you're a bigger slut than me. Sasuke leaned in and whispered into her ear. That sounds like a challenge. She narrowed her eyes and dug her nails into his back as she bit into his shoulder a little. Oh, it was, lightweight. They started ripping each other's clothes off as they stumbled towards the bedroom. Ooh. Sasuke froze up for a moment as he walked out of the girl's home or prison, depending on the point of view. It was late, and the only person on the street was a shadowy figure leaning against a lamppost. Naruto. His eyes went a little hard. The figure turned his head and seemed amused. I'm not going to scold you, don't worry. Though, considering the circumstances, it could be trouble if word got out. I'd vouch for him. I hate his guts, but it would be more trouble for me to get involved with something like that. I'm in no position to. Tayuya walked out and seemed to realize they were both surprised. I'm a trained ninja too, you know. My chakra might be sealed, but I'm still not stupid or weak. I noticed him stop outside suddenly. Naruto nodded. My point exactly. You're in no position to vouch for him. The Hyuga might not take it well. We don't need to be stepping on their toes. He seemed amused as he settled back down to leaning on the post. You two do make the cutest couple. Just be aware of what you might be doing to yourself, Sasuke. I think you can stay out of sight, but don't get caught this way again. Tayuya's eye twitched. What the fuck did you say, you little? Sasuke crossed his arms and turned his head away. Do you have a point? I can handle myself. The hooded ninja chuckled. Yeah. I wanted to talk to you. I could care less about this, I'm just offering a little advice. There are people who would welcome the chance to accuse you of the same crime you prevented earlier. Try to avoid giving them the opportunity. As for why I'm here, I want to talk to you about Itachi. Sasuke's eyes went dark and he scowled at him. What's to talk about? Tayuya was annoyed, but seemed to realize that she had no reason to be interested in the conversation and went back inside her home. Don't hang out in front of my place, she snapped at them both. Sasuke and Naruto looked back at the door as it closed and started walking away down the empty street. The hooded ninja kept his voice down and his head low. Plenty. You can have him, but he's involved with something that affects Shadow Realm. That's stepping on my toes. Naruto glanced at his former teammate. I want you to keep me informed about anything you might find about him. I'll return the favor. I've been hearing things about this Akatsuki, but nothing that can tell me who they are or what they are doing. I've learned a little though, it's supposedly a group of very powerful missing nin. I found mention of it in the intelligence we gathered from Orochimaru's base. I'm pretty sure that Orochimaru was a member of this group, but he attacked Itachi and was expelled. Since then, your brother has been partnered with Kisame Hoshigaki, one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. There are several other teams and they travel in pairs. Also, I've heard they are unusually diverse for a terrorist group. The members are not from a single country. Sasuke seemed to calm a little. Isn't some of that classified? Naruto hung his head a little. My loyalty is not to Konohagakure. Besides, you're an Anbu and my tattoo doesn't seem to think telling you is off limits. He rubbed at his arm a little as he said it. The dark-haired boy gasped. WH. What? He balled up his fist and stared him down. That's treason. You. His former leader shook his head and chuckled. Don't be stupid. I'm my own side in this. I have been since I signed my life away to Tamamo. I'm not committing treason because I'm the leader of one of Konohagakure's largest allies. I'm not a Konohagakure ninja anymore. I'm training this team and then I'm finished. I won't be remaining here in the village. Though, I'm not planning on sitting on a throne and kicking my heels up either. You're going rogue? You'd be a missing nin if you did that. Sasuke seemed almost amused and a bit cocky. Huh? Nah. No way I'll end up a missing nin. We'll be seeing each other around, I think, if only when I come back to visit. Part of it is being a diplomat after all. Tsunade doesn't want to upset us, we're useful allies and I have a particular attachment to this place. It is home after all. Not to mention, I've got a good political relationship with the daimyo. I think I get it, Sasuke seemed to think for a moment. You've been talking about this with her, haven't you? The blonde seemed to think on that. Pretty much. Something is going on that's bigger than Orochimaru could handle. He got in over his head, tried to screw them over for his own benefit and got burned. Your brother and his partner are currently the only real leads we've got right now. I'd also like to put this situation with Sound to rest before I get too far into that if I can. Tsunade knows I can't stay if I'm going to be king. She hasn't said anything so direct, but I'm not stupid and I've caught the hint. We're too useful and powerful as allies to not just let me go, and we have a common enemy. I don't think this Akatsuki group is going to be received well by the ninja villages. They're considered a terrorist group by pretty much everyone from the sound of things. What is my brother involved with? Asked Sasuke. I just spent the past couple of minutes explaining to you that I'd very much like to hear that myself. If you find anything out, let me know. Naruto hung his head a little. Sasuke narrowed his eyes a little. Next time just say so. Naruto gave a small sigh. I did, but apparently the blood you were using for your penis a few minutes ago hasn't arrived back to your brain yet. The blonde popped his arm. That good, huh? Weird. She's bitchy and has a nasty temper. Not to mention, she's a prisoner of war, and that's risky. Seems like the sort of trouble you'd avoid. Never mind. I almost forgot who I was talking to for a moment. He chuckled and looked up at the stars with his arms crossed. Sasuke shrugged. She doesn't talk much, she's direct, likes to be left alone mostly, and she bathes regularly. Naruto cocked his eyebrow and leaned back. Been keeping an eye on that, have we? Don't think I haven't noticed you've developed a taste for red hair. I expect you'll be doing it again then? Yes. I'm pretty sure I will. He shrugged at him, he was also a little annoyed. He seemed to catch the hint that Naruto was telling him, I shouldn't have been able to catch you like this, you should have known better, by teasing him about it. It was a bit annoying. I screwed your aunt. Naruto cocked his head. Huh. She must have been pretty hard up. She kept trying to have lesbian sex with me in Kumogakure. I got the impression she didn't care much for men at all. Her little girlfriend was fun though. Sasuke pulled his head back a bit in surprise. Wait. You stole your aunt's girlfriend? The blonde shook his head. More like, borrowed. She was trying to use her friend to help seduce me a little as well, so she kinda asked for it. To be honest, the impression I got is that the entire political scene pretty much works that way normally. There was quite a bit of screwing going on in that village, some literal, some not. Sasuke seemed to understand the reasoning. Oh. I guess I see what you mean. He seemed to drop the subject immediately after getting a grasp of it. So, what does that make us exactly? Last I checked, you were still a Leaf Junin. His former team leader looked up at him with a dangerous-looking smirk. Shadow and Fire are allies, but I am the king of Shadow Realm. I cannot split my loyalty. I'll not harm Konoha or Fire, but I will not choose them over my people. However, at the moment, I am still a Konohagakure ninja. I will remain one until I leave the village for good. Sasuke frowned at him and nodded. Hey. So that's it. Hokage figured you out and booted you off the team? The blonde nin nodded and seemed amused. That's about the size of it, yeah. The dark-haired nin glanced over his shoulder at his former boss. What's Shadow Realm's interest in my brother? I get why you're after him. You specifically said Shadow Realm has an interest though. He didn't look back as he asked. Naruto cocked his eyebrow a little, perhaps he was paying more attention than he'd originally thought. He knew Sasuke wasn't really stupid, he did get the top grades amongst the boys in the class. He also knew him well enough to realize that little detail wouldn't have caught his attention normally. I've reason to believe they were after the queen. I want to find out why. We're less interested in Itachi than we are in this organization he's in. Like I said, you can have him when you're ready. I need to know what he was up to, and what it has to do with my wife." Sasuke seemed surprised. "Huh? Why not let them have her? I mean, she is a giant monster who tricked you into marrying her. You have to protect her son and all, but why save her?" The blonde cocked his head. "She's a total babe. Seriously, mega hot. Being evil just makes it better. I'm not so bad off with this deal as a lot of people seem to think. Plus, she can do this thing with her tongue." The dark-haired boy seemed to think about that. "I guess that's a good reason. Alright, I'll keep you informed if I find anything out. You seem to know a lot more about it than I do. Thanks for the info." He put his hands in his pockets and walked away. He frowned a little as he found himself strolling alone. He's right. I can't get caught, at least not anytime soon. He glanced over his shoulder and didn't have a hard time admitting to himself that he was indeed going to do it again. She wasn't all talk and knew what she was doing. He could tell she was enjoying it, but she didn't smile. He found that appealing for reasons he didn't fully understand. Shino frowned as he looked at Kiba. The boy was struggling to his feet, covered in sweat, and gasping for breath. His wound wasn't infected, but he was severely weakened. He'd lost a bit of blood and was still adjusting to the loss of his arm. Akamaru whimpered at him a little and sat down. They were in a small town inside a temple. Shino had filled several containers with blessed water. He was now lugging around several gallons worth. "Kiba, get back in bed." They had spent a couple of hours there with the priests of the temple. They were glad to help and were familiar with the problem that plagued Whirlpool. It was clear they wanted the group gone before nightfall. "Huh? We've got to get moving." "We can't," growled the boy as he leaned against the wall. "You're too weak to continue." "You're staying here," replied Shino before he finished. "What? No way. I'm..." Kiba raised his voice but couldn't yell. Shino looked at the worried priest. He was a bald old man with a beard in a simple brown robe. "You'll be fine with him. They're after the man I'm guarding and won't bother with him. Take care of him until he's well enough to return to Konohagakure." The priest gave a small frown but nodded. "I understand. Don't be stupid, I'm..." grumbled Kiba as he staggered forward. Shino shoved him in the chest and sent him back into the bed. Akamaru ignored it and panted, looking passive. "Shut up. You're slowing us down. I can defend the two of us long enough to make it now that I have enough water. You're a deadweight right now. You'll stay here." Kiba floundered in the sheets and ended up on his knees on the ground. "How dare you? I'll..." His teammate looked down at him through his sunglasses. "You're no good to us dead, Kiba. Right now you're no good in a fight and you can barely walk." He pounded his fist on the ground and sobbed. "I know. But..." Shino gave a sigh. "I understand, and I know you do as well. Stay here. Once you are well enough, return to Konoha. I'll be there when you arrive. Our mission comes before our pride." The dog trainer didn't lift his head up, but gave a solemn-looking nod. "Why? Yeah." Shino turned away. "I'll collect my other companion and be on my way. Please, take care of him." The priest helped the boy back into the bed. "Don't worry too much, it shouldn't be more than a few days. Whoever dressed your wound knew what they were doing. I doubt you have to worry much about an infection." "It was the same bitch that cut it off to begin with," grumbled Kiba irritably as he let the old man help him. That got an odd look from the priest. "Well, I suppose it could have been worse. Trust me, infection is not the way a young man like yourself should like to die. There is no honor in it, and it is very slow and painful." The young ninja looked at his stump. "Yeah. I'm grateful. Ooh." Hinata looked down at the street with a cold stare. Behind her the moon was rising over the ocean of grass. She was on the edge of the broken capital of Whirlpool. It had once been a grand place, but now it was a shithole. Spread out before her were 1,000 broken-down hovels, taverns and shops in disrepair, and empty broken streets full of garbage that had not seen repair in many years. She was under a cloak that blew in the wind behind her. The wind was strong, but it didn't stray too far from her body because it was weighed down by the arms hidden within it. The inside was covered in small compartments and loops for various weaponry. Every Konoha ninja owned one, though most used it as little more than protection from the weather. In the daylight hours it was a haven for missing nin, criminals, and scum. In the evening, the streets were barren. She was on the roof of an old inn just inside the gates to the capital. She had bought a room inside, but wasn't about to stay there. Several of the patrons had given her looks that made it clear that she wasn't safe there. There was little doubt someone would come sneaking into the room looking for trouble in the night. In a place like that, a young and soft-looking girl traveling alone was a target too good to pass up. She didn't care. She wouldn't be there, and she was not there to bring law and order to criminals and perverts. She hunted something much darker that night. Her face betrayed no emotion as she looked out over the streets in her cloak. She knew why they were all but empty. She could see them. Her eyes were more than those of the peasants who hid in their homes and the thugs that cowered in the bars and inns. They were in the shadows, marked by their red chakra, hunting in the darkness for any who might stray into the night. There were about 15 around the entrance to the town. It was the place where unaware travelers were most likely to appear. She didn't know their habits and didn't understand that, but realized that there was an unusually large grouping of them around the outside of the inn. Best get started then. She jumped down to the middle of the street and landed in a crouch in the center of a large grouping. They all noticed her at once and looked surprised as she stood up in the middle of them. The things circled and began to close in around her. The hood cocked a little and she put one of her arms up, opening the cloak. "Could we get started? It's a long night, but I don't have that much time really." "Who the hell are you?" growled one of them as it backed away looking cautious. "Just some kid," replied another. One of the beasts sniffed the air. "She smells young and sweet. Rare." "How lucky for us," agreed another. "A bit small for all of us though," growled one of the larger beasts. Hinata was motionless through all of this. "Are you finished talking? If you're so hungry, come and get me." The cautious one backed away further as the others moved in. "Hunter," it muttered as it slipped away. The rest roared and became more monstrous in appearance as they moved in ever closer to the girl. It was obvious that though she was unaware of what she had encountered. "Not so brave now, are you?" chuckled one of the things as leered at her through its fangs. Its face had become wrinkled and inhuman looking. "Brave?" she asked as she turned her hood towards it. "I'm getting impatient. You're all too slow and this is taking longer than I wanted it to." "I don't sense any fear, something is," muttered one of them. "Yes, you are all within the field of my hake," replied the girl. She bent low and spread her arms with a kunai in each hand. "It is already over." One of the vampires gave a small gasp. "What?" The girl became a blur of motion and bounced from one monster to the next in an explosion of chakra-driven movement. When he looked down at his chest, he saw a delicate hand smudged with ash gripping a kunai knife that was driven into his chest. "And so it begins," she said as she pulled her hand back as he vanished and crumbled into a pile of smoldering dust. She turned and looked towards the palace at the center of the broken city. The palace throne was lit by torches hanging from the wall. A pale-skinned man with long dark hair sat with a bored expression on his face. The body of a young woman crumpled to the floor before the throne. Her skin was tight and she looked almost mummified. He looked no more than 50 and had a goatee that brushed the top of his chest as he lounged in his seat. A figure who stayed out of the torchlight as he walked onto the worn red carpet in front of him spoke up. "Killed another, have you? I halfway expected you to make a pawn out of this one." She was prettier than most. The figure on the throne gave a snort. "Too many mouths to feed as it is. Tell me, Aiden, do you grow tired of this existence?" The man in the shadows growled a little. "I didn't come to have a boring conversation. You've got a problem. A hunter, unusually powerful." The vampire didn't look worried. "So go and deal with her then. I'll not be bothered." The shadow gave a rough snort. "I'm not your subject. We're partners. Deal with it yourself." He hefted a weapon over his shoulder. "I only came to warn you because it was the last request of this one before he died." The shadow's arm moved and a head rolled into the torchlight. It was a vampire head and looked horrified. "Must you do this to my children?" grumbled the seated vampire. Like you said, too many mouths. It's not like a lazy old fart like you cares anyway. Listening you talk about how fucking boring everything is bores me even more. You'll understand soon enough, grumbled the vampire. Such slaughter loses its entertainment value after a few centuries. I'm hopeful you'll get more creative soon. I'll kill you before you get to see it, grumbled Aiden as he turned away. Ooh. Hinata opened the 12-foot doors before her with a simple push and walked forward with a frown on her face. 2 sets of armor clattered to the floor in her wake as they became filled with ash. She walked forward and looked around. She was covered in dust and a small cloud was produced by her cloak with every movement she made. I did not expect to make it this far in only one evening. Her eyes settled on the throne. I probably should have said something to my guard. However, I was too lazy to bother. The thing on the throne stood up and dusted off its long dark cloak. I had a meal this evening, but it was smaller than usual. I suppose I could go with a snack. Hinata narrowed her eyes and set herself with her weapons ready. Behind her was an open balcony with a man seated on the railing looking on. He was ignoring them and looking up at the moonlight with some sort of weapon over his shoulder. Aiden, you are not going to join us? Asked the creature. Fuck off. Deal with it yourself, grumbled the man as he continued to look up at the sky. Hinata glanced over her shoulder and frowned a little. His chakra wasn't normal, but it wasn't like that of a vampire either. She would have to be wary of him. I've come to destroy you. Yes. I know, the monster rolled his eyes and looked unconcerned. You are stronger than most. I see that. A shame you avenue overreached. I am more than 900 years old. You avenue come ere to die I am afraid. Hinata charged and slashed at him. She hooked her leg into several kicks and sliced through the air trying to hit him. He dodged with no real effort and didn't move much. He took a few steps about, but remained in near the same position. Hinata growled and backed away a little. She wasn't expecting it to be an easy fight, but he wasn't taking much effort to dodge her. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. I can't be afraid. I must win. You will die, said the old vampire with a heavy sigh. He didn't look very interested in the fight. The girl set herself and moved her arms forward in a slow motion. I shall destroy you. I doubt that, replied the man. An exorcism dance? It has been a few years. He waved his hand to beckon her forward. Come then. We'll see how well you can dance. She moved towards him with the precise motions of years of practice. Time slowed down as she spun and waved her arms through the motions of the dance. The vampire arched and stepped aside as she moved through where he was, always one step ahead of her dance. He looked interested after a moment. Such skill. I've not seen such a dancer in 100 years. You are to be commended, but it is not enough. The girl gasped and her dance ended. You think not? The creature's fangs grew longer. I'm afraid not. It grows late, and I must. Yes. I know. She stepped back and put the index and middle fingers of her right hand up in front of her face. You are within my seal, monster. I bind you. I banish you. The monster looked down at his feet. I see. There were white glowing lines on the ground and he was in the middle of a mystic circle. He screamed as a pillar of light enveloped him and flexed his claws. The thing growled as it stood before her looking monstrous. 2 large wings spread from its back and its head no longer looked remotely human. Beams of light were binding its hands, neck, legs, and wings from the outer edges of the circle. Impressive. The morning is still 2 hours away, and you do not avenue the strength of will to hold me that long. She frowned at him and kept her hands up. We'll see. This grows annoying. Aiden, do you intend to do nothing but watch? It looked back and saw the man on the balcony was gone. Hinata gasped and took a staggering step back. Her eyes were wide and shocked. 3 blades were jutting from the vampire's chest from behind it. A younger man with gray hair was standing behind him with a look of rage in his eyes. How many fucking times do I have to tell you? My name is Hidan, you blood-sucking leech. He pulled the weapon out of the monster and hacked at its neck with his bladed scythe. The thing's head rolled away and landed at Hinata's feet. She scowled at him and readied her weapons. The vampire burned away between them. He looked at her and gave a chuckle. I suppose I should let you go this time. After all, I could never get that bastard to stand still long enough to kill him. It was nice of you to hold him down for me. He turned away. Fuck. I hate leaving survivors. He started walking away and looked over his shoulder at her. If we meet again, I'll kill you. Normally I would anyway, but he's been getting on my nerves for a long time. I have no choice but to be a little grateful this time. Fucking demon hunting bitch. Hinata wasn't sure what to say or do. The man was less than human and evil, but he had just helped her out. She looked at the vampire's remains and then turned her eyes back at where he had gone. I suppose I should say the same then. Until next time. She had a feeling she wasn't strong enough to take him yet anyway. She walked over to the balcony and looked up at the moon. She did not believe that she would have been strong enough to hold the creature until morning. It had been a rash mistake on her part and she would have been destroyed before then. It seems I have much to learn. With that, Hinata put her leg on the balcony railing and looked up at the moon for a moment. She looked back over her shoulder at the pile of dust the monster had become and then down at the silver kunai in her grip. For Kurenai-sensei. She closed her eyes and turned to walk out of the palace again. She paused as she looked over her shoulder back into the throne room as she walked through the doors again. Demon hunter? Am I? Her face became conflicted for a moment and then relaxed. So be it. With that she vanished into the darkness again without another word. Ooh. Naruto was balanced on 2 stacks of bricks with one hand holding a book that he was reading. He was holding himself above the ground and seemed to be putting no effort out to do it. His students were grunting and groaning around him, each holding themselves up in a push-up position by balancing on top of small stacks of bricks. Beneath each of their bellies was a candle that kept them locked in that position. 10 more minutes to go, he said lazily as he scratched at his ear. The trio was covered in sweat. Hanabi was scowling and had her teeth clenched together. Konohamaru looked used to the exercise, but not comfortable with it. Midori was glaring at the back of her instructor's skull with bloodshot eyes and a strip of duct tape covered her mouth. She growled at him as he gave them an update on how long they'd been at it. The Jonin hadn't even started teaching them about sealing their chakra. Konohamaru already knew how, but the other 2 weren't developed enough physically to start. They were in shape as genin ninja of course, but it would take much less time to teach them to move again if he got them into better shape first. He seemed to notice the 2 girls were a bit annoyed at him over the exercise. Hanabi didn't look upset, but it was clear she didn't like her position much. You know, this is how I learned. I won't ask you to do anything I'm not willing to do myself. I'm using the same training methods my masters used. Masters? Asked Hanabi as she arched her eyebrow. She struggled for a moment to keep herself upright but regained her balance. Yeah. I've studied under 3 great masters, and well, several super perverts. That training was a little different though. You should know of Kakashi, you've probably heard of Jiraiya the perverted Sennin, and I'm afraid I can't tell you much about the others. They don't like it when people talk about them. Their instructor nodded and seemed cheerful. Midori was glaring at him and looked like she'd be muttering expletives at him if she could. She was in fact, but it was muffled and silenced by the tape over her mouth. Exactly why it was there. Naruto was quite pleased with himself for thinking ahead that way. Time is up. Naruto glared at the candles and a small light formed in the back of his irises. A small breeze put them all out and the trio of students slumped to the ground with shocked expressions on their faces. Whoa. Awesome. Muttered Konohamaru. Midori ripped the tape off her mouth and gasped. How did you do that? Their leader blinked and cocked his head. It's useful for putting out candles and lighting campfires, but that's about it. I couldn't teach you how to do that. Hanabi gasped. She didn't know much about what happened between her father and her new master. She knew something was going on between them though. She did know her father wanted her to be on the team with him. Naruto chuckled. No. It's nothing like that. He gave a small sigh. I've learned a little magic. It's no big deal. I have a lot of chakra, but very little magic potential. I can learn a few small tricks like that, but that's about all. Midori frowned at that and didn't look to trust it much. Her mouth was a bit red from removing the tape. Magical potential? Naruto nodded. That's right. Families that specialize in genjutsu techniques tend to have high magical potential. There are a lot of genjutsu techniques that use a lot of magical energy. The Hyuga girl looked confused. You mean chakra? Their instructor shook his head. No. It's different. You can use chakra to manipulate magical energy. The kitsune do this naturally, for example. They don't use much chakra for their tricks and illusions. It's mostly magical energy, which is why their illusions can't be matched by human genjutsu. Many genjutsu techniques use chakra to manipulate magical energy to create an illusion. It's one of the reasons ninja with lower chakra are often so good at the school. Usually there is a balance between the two. Those with less chakra potential are more able to use magic. The brunette girl scowled at that. I've never read anything like that. You just made that up. I believe him, said Konohamaru as he looked at her. He didn't seem upset about it. You would, grumbled the irate Kunoichi. There are a lot of things in the world you won't find in that library, replied Naruto with a casual-looking shrug. It doesn't really matter if you believe me or not. I'm good at finding things out. The girl narrowed her eyes at him. Oh yeah? What's 50% of 50? Naruto blinked. Huh? Konohamaru hung his head. Oh. Their instructor looked annoyed. What do you mean, oh? The irate brunette Kunoichi smirked. Stop acting like you're so great at everything. You're not, you know. Naruto frowned at her. So? I never said I was. What's your point? What have you got that I can't do? I can tell you the answer to that problem. Midori gave him an evil smirk. You suck at math. Naruto narrowed his eyes at her. Now look. He glanced over at Konohamaru and noticed him stifling chuckles. What is it? He looked away as he pulled his hand off. She's totally right, bro. Sensei. You're horrible at math. I failed every math test I took when I studied with you. Their leader stiffened up. So? I'm not an accountant. I'm a ninja, your superior, and your instructor. He growled a little and turned away from them. All right. You all know what's next. Time to work your abs to muscle failure again. That would make him feel better. Come on, only 1,000 crunches to go, and then we can have lunch. Great going, grumbled Hanabi as they all started getting on their backs. Like we weren't going to do this anyway, replied Midori. Konohamaru gave a heavy sigh. I hate to say it, but she's right this time, Hanabi. Naruto had frozen in place and had his eyebrow cocked. He was holding a folder that the Hokage would treat like a dead raccoon and hand it off as soon as she could. Probably to Shizune, as she stopped by to clear off the corner of the woman's desk where such busywork piled up. It was just a training report, they hadn't taken a mission that day. Genin didn't always get an assigned mission, there were stretches of several days mixed into their schedules for training purposes. Naruto had noticed that his schedule included a few more of those days than most Genin teams in the near future. The scene was not unusual, with the exception of the blue-haired woman standing beside his boss's desk. Umi smiled and waved at her nephew. Hey. Hello. Didn't expect to see you again so soon. He shook himself out of it and seemed to brush it off. He didn't bother handing the report to the Hokage and just put it in her pile on the corner. He'd noticed she didn't like to touch training reports with her hands if she could help it. His aunt turned away and walked towards the door. Well, I won't keep you any longer. I'll catch up with you later, Naruto. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to talk. He looked towards the woman behind the desk and found her looking at him. Well. I suppose I should tell you that she's your next assignment. Huh? Muttered the boy as his eyes went blank. The Hokage looked a bit more somber than normal that day. Don't worry, you're on defense this time. I know you can handle it, and it will be good for your team. It's AC ranked mission, the first one for you and your team. What are the details? He asked as he relaxed and crossed his arms. Well, I'm not handing it over to you until tomorrow. It's still being processed. Basically, you're to try and make sure things go smoothly in Whirlpool. The team that went there before succeeded, but the price was high. Kurenai was killed, and Hinata is missing. We presume she's dead, but if you can find any information about what happened to her, we'd like you to investigate. It was a mess, but the danger is largely past as I understand it. The people aren't exactly upset with the fall of their government, but... The boy gave a nod at that. Asuma isn't going to like that. He's been informed, replied the woman. I'm giving his team a few days off so he can recover. He tried to talk me out of that, but we're not at war right now. I can do without him for a few days. I'll have to offer my condolences when I see him again, said the boy as he looked at her. There are probably a few groups who won't care much for someone who isn't them sitting on top. Probably just thugs for the most part. As for Hinata, I'll keep my ears open. Hanabi may be of use with that. She'll know her sister, and may notice something I wouldn't. He paced a little as well. Who are we protecting? Lord Odiri and his ambassador. You already know one of them. She sat back in her chair and seemed to think on it. Shouldn't be too much trouble. The window of opportunity is small in a situation like this. Once things settle down a bit, Odiri should be safe. Whirlpool hasn't had ninjas since the last Great War, and there isn't much incentive for the other clans to take action against it. Having things settled quickly and one more chaotic region stabilize is good for everyone. Water Country is a good example in recent times. Not the friendliest place though. Some might think of it as a poor example, replied Naruto. Ninja combat may be unlikely, but it is also very possible. There are a lot of missing nin in the country. The chaos there made it something of a safe haven for them. Are you sure you want a genin team on this one? I'll take any work you hand me, you know that. Still, this doesn't seem like the sort of situation where we should be collecting a C-ranked rate. Umi isn't paying herself this time, no need to give her a break on the price. I don't mind handing this off to a team with more experience at a better rate. These kids are still green. Tsunade nodded. All right. At least you're partially correct. Her head was pressed firmly against the desk. I'm terrible at my job. She dissuaded me. She frowned, furrowed her brow, and began to complain about some old man, something unpleasant. I'm still giving it to you. You are personally connected to this. He averted his gaze. That gives me even more reason to be concerned. While I would like to see my aunt once more, I must not allow it to interfere with my work. Even if the team could succeed, I'm not the right person for this job. Umi did have a way of deterring him while maintaining his interest. She laughed, leaning forward. Yes. Yes, I am aware. Look, this situation with Hinata is one of the reasons I'm sending you. She believes me to be a vampire. Maybe I'm not the greatest person for that either. Realizing he couldn't talk her out of it, he hung his head. Hanabi may be useful, but I'm not so sure Hinata will react well to me being there. She gave him a scowl and gave a nod. All right, then. Team Kurenai is to be relieved of their duty by you. Time to bring them home, I think. In trying to complete this mission, we've lost a lot. Yes, I will, the man answered. With a slight bow, he turned to walk out of her office. There was something wrong with the mission. This was Tsunade's mess to clean up, so she was giving it to him to show that he could. If his former team had been accompanying him, he would have remained silent. But things would get a little trickier with the genin. Though it was not impossible, he now needed to account for their inexperience in his plans. Naturally, he had no intention of failing, but it would require a bit more consideration than it might have in the past. The majority of the work would need to be done by him because all he had done up to this point had been physical training to get them ready for the more advanced training he would be providing. That was a little irksome. Hands behind his back, Naruto strolled through a small temple in Whirlpool. The remainder of his team had already left for the palace. He went through a door on the right and into a medical facility after turning down a lengthy hallway. He hesitated, glancing around for a while. Kiba, Akamaru, I trust you're recovering? The boy was sitting with his hood pulled over his head and the curtains drawing attention to his frown. Yes. I am to stay for 2 more days, they say. I believe I have the strength to return on my own. How are things going for everyone? He laughed sarcastically. The Junin did not back down. Hinata is not with us. She's no longer there. The boy in the hood appeared to loosen up as Kiba adopted a semi-serious look. Even now, he appeared tired but confident. She is doing well. Still alive, that is. He turned to face his lone hand. I'm pretty sure. He had a strong gut feeling about that, though he wasn't sure how he knew. Then she's a missing nin, was Naruto's straightforward reply. She's currently regarded as rogue, but I doubt she'll be classified as a criminal. To be honest, I have no idea how that would turn out. I'm hoping she comes back soon. Akamaru whined and rested his head on his paws next to the bed as Kiba nodded. And Shino? Naruto nodded consolingly. He reported the incident to the Hokage. Whirlpool now under Odiri's control. Your mission was accomplished. The boy growled, at what cost? With anger. For a brief moment, Naruto remained silent. Kurenai was unknown to me. I'm here to pick you up, and I'm sorry for your loss. Kiba appeared perplexed. Huh? He winced a little and tried to scratch the back of his head with his stump. Hey. On my own, I can succeed. I didn't require any kind of escort. The ninja in a hood shook his head. Not at all. You see, you've been temporarily moved to assist me while my group and I finish our task here at Whirlpool. You'll return to Konoha with my team after we're done. The canine instructor tilted his head. Say what? He just shrugged, his age rather than rank being his peer. Kiba scowled. Hold on. You would have a signed order from the Hokage if that were the case. I'd like to see it. In fact, Naruto appeared to brighten up a bit. I am not in need of one. I am a Junin and a captain in the ANBU. I'm allowed to take the initiative and complete it on my own. With a frown, the boy covered his feet with the bed's side. Although he appeared sleepy, he appeared to be waking up. Are you not currently on a genin team or something? You used to be an Anbu. The hooded boy leaned against the wall and said, simply, who says we leave the Anbu when we take genin teams? Isn't that just a rumor? Is the situation reversed? Dickhead. Alright. Anything that's not this bed, just sitting here. I'm over it. Kiba stood up abruptly and extended his arms. Awful. As rigid as a board, I am. I've spent a week in that bed. He gave a groan and popped his back. Panting at his side, Akamaru appeared somewhat lethargic. Naturally, he had been moving around as much as possible, but during his first few days there, he was barely able to stand. Even though he could move around more, it was clear that he was still not fully recovered. With his arms uncrossed, Naruto inclined his head. Hey. Actually, I can assist with that. Kiba, who had been staying in a room, was leaning against the wall outside. There were some very loud growls, snarls, and yips coming from inside. With his arms folded, Naruto was reclining against the opposite wall of the door. Kiba appeared to be completely awake and was feeling much better. But he did appear a little anxious. Whoa. Me, along with my dog? The ninja in the hood gave a slight shrug. Well, she is a kitsune. The girl with the violet hair that Naruto had called forth had given Kiba a really good massage. He was still a little red in the face from how it turned out. After leaving the room, Naruto discovered him leaning against the door while the girl changed into a fox and began touching Akamaru in an unsettling way. When he attempted to move her away from him, Akamaru growled at him. He had just ended up walking away and leaning with his temporary boss against the wall. What's that mean? It dawned on the other boy that his companion knew nothing about foxes. Things like this are typical. Simply put, don't stress over it. With wide eyes, the genin peered over his shoulder at some of the noises emanating from inside the room. Are you positive she's okay? It seems possible that Akamaru is harming her. Head cocked, Naruto did. Nope. For a fox, those are pleasing noises. Kiba gave him a glare. Dude, that's just weird. I'm not even interested in learning how you found out. The wise man laughed. Indeed. Okay. Things seem to be coming to an end. After leaving the room at a trot and taking off their coats, Akamaru and Kira approached their usual companion and took a seat, appearing relatively composed and at ease overall. Akamaru gave a thumping motion with his tail on the ground and raised an eyebrow at his master, seemingly requesting more guidance. Kiba sighed slightly and turned to face his interim manager. So what happens next? When we return, I better not get into any trouble for this. Naruto gave a nod. You're not going to. Come on, you're much more knowledgeable about this place than I am. It was diplomatically required that I travel here in a carriage. I need you to give me the rundown on the terrain since I didn't get a chance to see much of it. With a snort, the genin thrust his hand into his pocket. All right. Please don't anticipate too much from me. I haven't gotten used to not having my hand. I'm still not fully recovered from it, but it almost killed me. Still, I could have returned on my own just fine. The trip isn't that tough. As he spoke, a sinister expression appeared in his eyes. Hinata. She'll be all right? Shrugging, Naruto said. I have no idea what the future holds for her. If she ever makes a comeback, I guess it will depend on what she has to say. I wonder how this will go over with the Hyuga. Since she belongs to the main branch, they might not be too fond of having an unguarded pair of Byakugan eyes that are not under their direct control. If nothing else, I believe the clan will make an effort to apprehend her and bring her back. Unless they are unable to bring her back after multiple attempts, I don't think the Hokage will intervene. She does have time, if nothing else. She hasn't yet been labeled a criminal. Hopefully we can locate her first. Perhaps resolve this quietly and swiftly. Kiba squinted at the young man. What do you mean, clear this up? I'm not under any orders to harm her or apprehend her. I'm supposed to try and get in touch with her, and maybe even persuade her to come back with us or on her own. Which doesn't matter. Naruto appeared to comprehend his misgivings. Never fear. I'm not an assassin here. Her sister is a genin on my side, and I already maintain diplomatic relations with Whirlpool. Making contact with Hinata is the backup plan. My goal is to ensure Odiri survives long enough to solidify his position and seize control in order to preserve Whirlpool's stability. He looked over at the genin accompanying him down the hallway. I enjoy achieving secondary goals. Really, it's an obsession. You'll be helpful in that, I believe. She doesn't have much faith in me. I'm a little concerned that she might not accept me. The genin laughed. Yes. That makes sense to me. You really frighten her. The blonde nin gave a nod. Indeed. That's right. That might be made easier by having you and her sister here. Perhaps it would be best if I stay out of it and let Hanabi and you get in touch with her. With a slightly suspicious expression, Kiba nodded. I guess. Being upright felt a lot better for him. It had also helped to have a good rubdown, and he was fine with the finish. It was a little odd that she went straight after his dog, but it didn't bother him. Akamaru had a calm, submissive appearance. But he wasn't feeling well. He had lost an arm and his teacher had passed away, so he didn't feel like he had one. Naruto gave him a quick look. Never fear. I have no intention of using my team to bully you. You're mainly out of the picture for this one, but I might ask for your assistance. I'm not helpless. I'll be alright, Kiba snarled. He observed how Naruto had described his missing arm, as he was still a little sensitive about it. He was looking for something to occupy his time and distract him from his worries. He made the decision to simply move on and observe the situation. No, however, you have injuries. You'll need some time to get used to it and heal. I'll keep you occupied, but the majority of the work will be handled by my team. After all, I should be giving them instructions. After giving him a shoulder slap, Naruto led him through the corridor of the temple. Slow down. Isn't it going to be pleasant to have someone else doing the menial tasks for once? Har, the boy snarled. It would be nice for someone else to handle most of the tedious work for once, and he wasn't feeling too bad about it all. As they walked away, Akamaru trotted up next to him, appearing content and at ease. He made it a point to pause and express his gratitude to the elderly priest who had looked after him and his dog before continuing on their journey.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.